Chapter 330, Shu Long Black Halberd. In the past, I had a nickname in the Yao world, Pu Yao said, but he seemed to realize something and switched the topic. Oh, let's not mention what is in the past. The people you have don't have bad personalities, but their talent isn't great. Pu Yao had a face full of helplessness. Suemo knew he had more to say, and didn't interrupt. You have been practicing the 6 transformations of the great Damo physique, and you have let go of your Yao arts. There hasn't been much development in your study of formations. Pu Yao's expression darkened. Humph, that guy took all the benefits. Suemo knew that Pu Yao was speaking of the gravestone. He rolled his eyes. Don't say that I'm not cultivating the Yao arts. Who made it that your little thousand-leaf hands isn't as strong as the great Damo physique? You can't have me lose my life. Pu Yao stopped speaking. The great Damo physique was domineering and unyielding. It really wasn't an easy matter to find a Yao art that could rival it at this stage. The few that he knew were extremely rigid in their cultivation. Actually, the progression of great Damo physique was extremely difficult, but Suemo had muddled through it and succeeded. Pu Yao felt very surprised at that fact. Was Suemo fated to cultivate Mo skills? Pu Yao felt even more discontent. Ha, I don't care about that. Pu Yao smirked. Don't you want spells? No problem. Here, this is the little Yao art record. It is a very simple thing. 500 types. When you can cultivate all of them, I will give you a spell. Finishing, he threw a jade scroll at Suemo. Ignoring the gaping Suemo, he disappeared. This guy was crazy. After a while, Suemo's first thought was that Pu Yao was crazy. He then was furious. This guy didn't look at the time. In such a dangerous place, he had the idle time act passive-aggressively against the gravestone. Pu! Come out. Idiot, GE is telling you. If you don't want to live, don't pull GE along. No matter how Suemo swore, Pu Yao did not respond. After swearing for a while, Suemo was tired, and sat down. Scanning the jade scroll, his expression instantly became bitter. He had once been troubled by the lack of spells. He had never thought there would be a day where he would be troubled by having too many spells and Yao arts to practice. The power of the 6 transformations of the great Damo physique was out of his imagination. He liked them a lot. He naturally would practice such life-saving moves every day. The 6 transformations didn't have many changes, but each transformation was vast and profound. It wasn't an easy matter to master them. He had just familiarized himself with the 2nd transformation, Golden Crow Feet. How couldn't Suemo be angry about Pu Yao doing this at such an important time? If he could master all 6 changes, Suemo's power would rival that of a Jindan 3rd Stratum Shuzha. Suemo suddenly swearing made everyone else still where they stood, their faces puzzled. Shu Long's entire body was covered by thick black energy. In the last 3 days, he was motionless like a statue wrapped in black energy. The entire guard camp was on their guard. Shu Long was the first to make a breakthrough among them, and had attracted all of their attention. The black energy roiled like countless snakes slithering about. 2 balls shocking red light suddenly lit up among the thick inky black energy. The bloodthirsty savage eyes of a wild beast were Shu Long's eyes. Ping! Shu Long's right hand rose in front of his chest, then his right hand pressed against the air as he made an extremely strange posture. He suddenly made a hoarse and deep roar. The black energy around his body seemed to be stimulated and started to furiously flood towards his hands. Large volumes of black energy flowed on his arms like a black snake. In the blink of an eye, the black energy on his hands was so thick it seemed tangible. The inky black energy dripped and flowed down to form a black stream about 1 zhang long. The black energy on Shu Long's body continuously flowed towards this slender black flow. The shocking red eyes revealed a hint of pain. The black energy around Shu Long's body suddenly shook, and showed signs of dissipating. The surrounding people exclaimed in shock. But the light of the red eyes brightened, and the slightly unsteady black energy seemed to be steadily attracted by an invisible force. Everyone in the surroundings released a breath. Between the two hands, the slender black flow slowly flowed and became even thicker and more viscous. The speed of the flow became increasingly slow. Even Zhuemo ignored his headache and ran over. The other people didn't even dare to blink. They all knew that Xu Long's weapon was about to form. The black energy of the black slender flow suddenly grew. At the same time, Xu Long's eyes brightened. His two hands that had been grasping at air suddenly tightened. Pia! The two large hands were like two pincers that suddenly gripped the black slender flow. The threads of black energy spreading around the black slender flow dissipated. A long black spear appeared on front of everyone. Hiss! The black energy around Xu Long's body burrowed into his body, and revealed his black armor. Xu Long has fortunately succeeded. Xu Long suppressed his excitement, and came in front of Zhuemo to bow. After leveling up, the authority that Xu Long exuded was even more stern, and his power had clearly gone up a stage. Good. Zhuemo was very happy. On one hand, he was happy that Xu Long had made a breakthrough. On the other, the success of Xu Long's breakthrough created a great increase in morale. Zhuemo's eyes quickly landed on the long black halberd in Xu Long's hands. The long halberd was about 1 zhang long, with a crescent curve, and a point. The shape was old-fashioned. The body of the halberd was as thick as a goose egg, smooth and glowing. It was extremely fine. At the blade of the halberd was a hint of eerie red like the fangs of a wild beast tinged with blood. Deep thick killing essence came from the body of the halberd. Looking at it from afar, it definitely was a vicious weapon. Xu Long didn't just get the addition of the black halberd in this breakthrough. His armor had also changed greatly. The thick black scales of armor became much thinner, the black color even purer. The thick clumsy feeling had disappeared, and it seemed to become nimble. The other people in guard camp couldn't resist any long and flooded over. Seeing the situation, Zhuemo smiled and stepped to the side. Lei Peng looked from afar at the joyful guard camp and muttered, Xu Long's bunch is really weird. They can even use black fiendish energy. We are unfortunate. We have to stay on the boats every day. It's enough to suffocate us to death. Blue-white sword lotuses bloomed and died among Nian Lu's fingers. He said without raising his head, if you have the energy to complain, spend some time practicing your saber scripture. Lei Peng's expression became even more depressed. Cultivate my ass. An isn't like you, if an cultivates that saber scripture, this boat will break. Nian Lu's sword scripture did not lack exquisite and small sword moves, but Lei Peng's saber scripture was wide and broad. If he left the slave transporting boats, under the corrosion of the black fiendish energy, it wasn't just dangerous but the rate that Ling power was expended was also multiple times what it usually was. He would run out of Ling power after just a few moves. Ma Fan coincidentally passed by the two. Hearing this, he stopped and stared at Lei Peng. At the beginning, Lei Peng didn't care, but after being stared at for a while, and seeing Ma Fan still remain silent, he said self-consciously, "What, why are you looking at him?" Ma Fan thought and then said, "Your saber scripture is powerful and domineering, but if you could get it to become finer, its power will definitely go up a step." Lei Peng stilled and then started to ponder it. He looked rough, but he wasn't dumb. If he was dumb, he couldn't have comprehended saber essence. Ma Fan's words caused him to sink into deep thought. Ma Fan prepared to leave after speaking, but Nian Lu hurriedly pulled him back, and said fawningly, "Head, how can you be so cruel? I'm also your vice commander. Teach me something." Ma Fan had an expression between smiling and crying. Two vice commanders, Lei Peng's temper was explosive, but he was a chatterbox, while Nian Lu was warm, but he was a show-off. He lowered his head to think. Your Blue Lotus sword scripture has many complex transformations, but if you want to progress, don't linger on these transformations. You have to make the complex simple, using sword essence at the core. Sword essence at the core, Nian Lu murmured unfocusedly. Ma Fan silently left, but he also looked outside the boat and felt dejected. Xia Shan becoming a Jin Dan had been a great stimulus to him. His talent at cultivating the sword was exceptional, and he had progressed very quickly when he focused, especially in the area of sword essence. He had touched the border of sword essence manifestation. The only thing limiting him was his cultivation. But who would have thought they suddenly landed in this ghastly place? The Ling energy was thin, and that horrid black fiendish energy made it even worse than Little Mountain Jie. While Little Mountain Jie was thin on Ling power, but there was Jingshi. They had Jingshi right now, but everyone didn't dare to use it to cultivate. Who knew how long they would stay in this ghastly place? If they encountered danger, these Jingshi would be life-saving. Stuck at this point, how could his mood not be terrible? But his mentality was much more stable than Nian Lu and Lei Peng, and he could suppress it. Sui Mo stared in a daze as he held the records of Little Yao arts. Little Yao arts were another name for basic Yao arts. They weren't anything profound, but the contents were something every Yao had to practice. As he flipped through, Sui Mo found that the difficulty of these Little Yao arts were not hard. He didn't immediately start cultivating them, but pondered on what Pu Yao's goal was. Pu Yao was whimsical and ever-changing. Sui Mo had learned this countless times before, but he had a strong feeling this time, this was just the beginning of something. This was the part that Sui Mo really had a headache about. He didn't know what was going on in Pu Yao's mind, but it seemed he was very determined this time. What would happen after would definitely affect his practice of the 6 transformations of the Great Damo physique. At this time, these 6 transformations were the basis of his life-saving measures. Sui Mo rubbed his forehead in a headache. He had to think of a way to satisfy both. Sui Mo suddenly thought of the matter where Pu Yao had gotten him to study Mo matrices. His mind moved. Was this Pu Yao's true goal? He remembered very clearly how much Pu Yao had cared about formations. Even though he had eaten a Jindan's golden core, and Pu Yao looked to have recovered greatly, but upon deeper thought, if Pu Yao could be healed with a single golden core, he definitely wouldn't have been so nervous back then. Was it the study of formations? Sui Mo was slightly unsure. After leaving Little Mountain Jie, Sui Mo had been rushed by the series of events and hadn't had the time to calm down to study formations. Sui Mo was very clear about the value of formations. If he slacked off right now, it was a pity. But right now, he didn't have the time to personally work on it. After thinking for a long time, Sui Mo still couldn't get Pu Yao's goal, but he still decided to restart his study of formations. This time, he decided to make it a big move. Chapter 331, Disseminating. Sui Mo sat cross-legged as he recalled everything he had learned. Formations, forging, fire manipulation, dan making, he had dabbled in all of them, and formed his own knowledge over time, but he had never systematically examined his knowledge. Having a moment for self-assessment today, he unexpectedly found that what he learned was extremely heterogeneous and the great majority of things were not systematic. How could he work with this? He thought with a furrowed brow. Wei Qingbin concentrated on reading the jade scroll in his hand. After leaving Little Mountain Jie, all of Golden Crow Camp had been very idle. There were no missions and everyone could study topics that they were interested in. Some people were very interested in conversing with others. The present environment of Golden Crow Camp was extremely positive. Everyone had went through hardship together, and had formed deep relationships. They had long thrown the ideals of sect and family away. The 2 masters, Ji Wei and Sun Bao, would occasionally hold lectures. Wei Qingbin would attend each one of them and would learn much. It was a pity that they couldn't cultivate at present. Darren had allowed them to access great numbers of jade scrolls, and there were many fourth-grade core scriptures suitable for production shoujo. Everyone had originally been filled with motivation and planned on working hard on their cultivation in the hopes of reaching Jindan as early as possible. Who could have thought they would end up in this place where they couldn't even cultivate? Everyone could only put their attention on the jade scrolls, and content themselves with study. Chengbin. A male popped his head in. This male was called Wan Tian. His features were unusually ugly, but his fire manipulation skills were uncanny and ranked first in the entire camp. Even the two masters, Sun Bao and Ji Wei, praised it endlessly. What terrible idea do you have now? Wei Qingbin helplessly put down the jade scroll in his hands. He, Wan Tian snickered, and whispered, I want to get a bit of black fiendish energy to study. Black fiendish energy? Wei Qingbin's heart jumped as he said with a serious expression. Old Wan, don't mess around. Black fiendish energy is extremely dangerous. It isn't anything that people of our cultivation can touch. I know that. Wan Tian knew how dangerous it was. I just want to get a thread, and see the mysteries of this black fiendish energy. This is a rare chance. We probably won't ever encounter black fiendish energy again in the future. Wei Qingbin was persuaded. It would be false to say he was not curious, but his personality was a cautious one. He thought, and then said, this probably needs the approval of the two masters. Of course, of course. The masters usually rely on you. If you go to ask for it, there definitely wouldn't be a problem, Wan Tian was overjoyed as he hurriedly said. Just at this time, Master Sun Bao's voice suddenly boomed out from above, everyone, come to Golden Crow Hall immediately. Wei Qingbin and Wan Tian exchanged a look and were both shocked. There was a hint of excitement in Master Sun Bao's voice. Golden Crow Hall was the largest room in this slave-transporting boat, and had been modified by the two masters to be the place they held their lessons. When the two arrived, Golden Crow Hall was filled with people. The two masters sat at the very front with barely disguised excitement. After everyone had gathered, Master Sun Bao slowly swept a look across the people and took a deep breath before saying solemnly, Today, Darren has given us a jade scroll. Recorded within it is Darren's knowledge and insights, including the Great Golden Crow Formation, how to make fire beads, the fire paper method, a chapter on the seal scripts of the formation battle watchtowers, the seal scripts for the body formations, and so on. Boom, it was like an explosion occurred. Some were dumbstruck, some were unable to speak, some were breathing heavily. Every name that came from the mouth of the master was a blow that was like lightning streaking over their bodies. Wei Qingbin and Wan Tian gaped as they were dumbstruck where they stood. Wei Qingbin felt his head was ringing. He felt like he was dreaming. Was this real? Was this real? Each name was a kind of lost knowledge, a bit of lost knowledge that should not be easily passed on to others. For example, the Great Golden Crow Formation that could gather sunlight to form Golden Crow Fire. If a sect knew someone had this formation, they would try to obtain it at any cost. Each person had uncontrollable joy on their faces, but gradually, the joy on their faces disappeared and became serious. The entire Golden Crow Hall was completely silent. The gravity of the situation showed on everyone's faces because this jade scroll was like mountain that weighed on everyone's hearts. The usually warm Master Ji Wei's expression was cold and serious. When he spoke, his tone was stern. Everyone knows the value of this jade scroll, there's no need for me to say more. Darren led us out of Little Mountain Jia and did not abandon us. Now, he is imparting these rare and lost knowledge to us. Let me ask, which sect can do so? No one said a word. That was right, which sect could do so? No sect would be able to do so. They had all been members of large sects before. Lost knowledge like this was unavailable to anyone except the core disciples, no matter how much an individual contributed. In just a few words, Master Ji Wei's words made everyone's hearts feel heavy. So, Master Ji Wei's heavy tone paused, his eyes lighting up and flashing across the people present. I and Master Sun Bao have discussed and agreed that anyone who will learn from this jade scroll must first make a killing heart oath. Our Golden Crow camp will become its own sect loyal to Darren. Zhuemo did not know what effect his actions created. After putting in large amounts of effort, and producing that jade scroll, he sunk into frenzied cultivation. But what made Pu Yao discontent was that Zhuemo did not just cultivate the little Yao arts but practiced them together with the 6 transformations of the great Damo physique. Was even this method useless? Pu Yao wondered, but then he understood when he changed his way of thinking. Zhuemo had experienced the power of the great Damo physique and thought it was stronger, which was why he was working so hard on it. Pu Yao's eyes looked towards the sky. Threads of black energy floated in the blood-tinged sky. His eyes lit up. He snickered, and instantly felt unhurried. Then his figure disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in the 10-finger prison. Pu Yao was like a ghost, those Yao art Jinji had no effect on him. His speed was wondrously fast as the scenery flashed by. Qi suddenly stopped in his steps, his hair was red and his features were masculine like a lion, and looked with shock towards the sky. "Teacher? What is it?" the students beside him hurriedly asked. "Oh, nothing." Qi turned his gaze back, and pretended to be calm. "Everyone, be careful. It is your first trip to 10-finger prison. Vast water clear skies should not have any dangers for you, but still be careful, especially of provoking other Yao." The students beside him all agreed, their faces full of anticipation. They had all gotten to the soul-planting stage, and were starting to try out real battle. Qi did not speak. His gaze uncontrollably went back to the distance. Just now, he had barely detected that a peerlessly powerful Yao had passed by. This feeling wasn't clear, but it made him feel fear. Was it a sky Yao? "I can't find it. That place is a bit strange." Pu Yao murmured to himself, his brows tightly locked. Zhuemo's legs were glittering with golden light as though they were made from gold. The pattern of each muscle was clear and distinct. Dong, Zhuemo was unable to control it well, and like a knife carving into tofu, his right leg was deeply embedded into the earth up to his hamstrings. At the side, Xu Long and Xia Shan's jaws gaped. The earth here had been tempered by thousands of years of black fiendish energy, and was as hard as steel. But in front of Zhuemo's legs, they seemed to be made of tofu. If they were hit with that leg. Xu Long and Xia Shan reflexively turned their eyes away. Zhuemo's forehead was covered with sweat. He pulled his right leg from the earth, but he lost control of his left leg. Pew, that also sank into the earth. His figure lost balance and fell on the ground. His body wasn't as strong as his legs, and he bared his teeth in pain. The troop maintained a constant speed as it traveled, so Zhuemo decided to cultivate using this method. Light Void Wings was meant for speed, and Golden Crow Feet was for power. Before this, Zhuemo found it hard to understand how those MO that focused on strength could rival the Xiuzhe that had powerful long-distance attacks. He only started to understand as he started to cultivate Golden Crow Feet. Any kind of power was extremely terrifying when it reached a certain level. When pure strength reached a certain level, it would form a boundary in the surroundings to make a force boundary. Any other power that entered this area would be fiercely attacked. It was possible to imagine how a flying sword of a Xiuzhe would have to break this force boundary before wounding its target. Entering the force boundary, what the flying sword would face was a collision of power without any finesse. Zhuemo was still a long way off from forming a force boundary, but he wasn't in a hurry. The beautiful feeling of pure power intoxicated him. He used the time on the road every day to practice the 6 transformations of the great Damo physique, and when he was resting, he would cultivate the little Yao arts. As to the dangers in front, was of little concern to him, but his cultivation took up all his time. Compared to the difficulty of Zhuemo's cultivation, the cultivation speed of 10th grade was astoundingly fast. He now had a black crescent flying blade beside him. This black flying knife was like a black butterfly that danced and circled around 10th grade without exhaustion. Even Shu Long was jealous. He had overcome great hardships to form his weapon, yet 10th grade had cultivated his weapon in a month. Lil, Pagoda and Lil, Fire curiously floated around 10th grade. The two little ones clearly were filled with curiosity about this little black person. 10th grade didn't even bat an eye. He concentrated on cultivation. Of course, he also knew the connection between Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire to master, so he did not act. But 10th grade, his goal was to reach 10th grade. With such a high and grand goal, how could he live a life of idleness with these people that only knew how to play every day? 10th grade raised his eyelid a crack and imperceptibly glanced at the two little ones as he thought proudly. Who knew that Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire found the black crescent blade flying around 10th grade was very fun. They started to chase the black crescent and twirled around 10th grade. 10th grade that wanted to focus on cultivation felt very irritated. He could not resist any longer. Opening his eyes, his murderous intent brimmed. Go play somewhere else. Stop bothering me. Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire shook and flew far away in fear. Silly bird who had been dozing suddenly opened her eyes. The bird eyes narrowed and flashed savagely. Her figure suddenly disappeared from her spot. 10th grade felt alarm, but he was unable to muster a response before a powerful force whipped his body. Bam! He was like a rock that had been kicked and landed head first in the ground. The dizzy 10th grade tried to struggle up, his heart brimming with killing intent as he wanted to attack. An enormously big bird claw came from the sky. The enormous shadow covered 10th grade. Pew! Limbs spread out, 10th grade was splayed out and pinned to the ground by silly bird's claws. He was unable to move. In 10th grade's eyes, an enormous bird head with a pair of vicious eyes came down and stared at him. 10th grade's body froze as he was dumbstruck. Chapter 332, Fiendish Mist who finally finished learning the 300th Little Yao art. Mo exhaled deeply. Little Yao arts were not complicated at all, but there were so many kinds it was a headache. If it wasn't that his consciousness foundation wasn't bad, it probably would be much harder. He suddenly raised his head. A disturbance was occurring at the front. There was a situation. Mo was not frightened and was happy. After so many days that he couldn't even remember clearly, they hadn't encountered anything ever since entering this damned ancient battlefield. His figure shifted and he appeared at the very front of the troop. Not far away was a spread of thin bloody mist that seemed to have things moving inside it. The bloody mist was very vast, and showed no end. Out of caution, the troop had stopped. Pu Yao came out and looked gravely at the bloody mist up ahead. Careful, this is fiendish mist. Inside are fiend soul beasts. It wasn't the first time Mo had heard Pu Yao mention fiendish soul beasts. Every time Pu Yao spoke of them, his tone was very grave. He couldn't resist asking, are those things very powerful? And Pu Yao looked at the bloody mist up ahead, amazement unable to be disguised in his bloody pupil. In any battlefield that has souls that have not transcended after death, the souls of those dead would roam the battlefield. If the fiendish energy of the battlefield is heavy, these souls will not dissipate, and will absorb fiendish energy to form fiendish souls. Over time, fiendish souls will become fiendish soul beasts. This fiendish mist is a size never heard of before. The fiend soul beasts inside will also be great. Pu Yao's words made Mo feel hesitant. If it really was so dangerous, going into this bloody mist. After a few moments of thought, he ordered for camp to be set. Golden Crow Camp had completely transformed. Golden Crow Hall was filled with people that gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to discuss their studies. It was very noisy. This was an unique habit that they had formed during their time in Little Mountain Jia. Everyone had come from small sects, and were limited in their knowledge. Many of the problems that they encountered were not ones that could be resolved by themselves. Out of helplessness, consolidating everyone's strength became the only choice. Over time, this became a unique habit of Golden Crow Camp. The unique open environment of Golden Crow Camp and the trust built up due to persevering through hardship together was the most fertile ground to grow these relationships. Zhuo Mo's Jade Scroll was like a spring rain that instantly created vitality. But today, they had not gathered to discuss problems of formations. The fiendish mist is in front of us. Even though Darren has decided to temporarily make camp, we need to prepare for entering the fiendish mist, Sun Bao said seriously. Everyone listened careful. After they had all sworn the Killing Heart oath, they became much closer. If before they were more like partners working together, then now everyone was of the same sect. I don't want to interrupt everyone's cultivation plans, but the situation is an emergency, Ji Wei continued. Our Golden Crow Camp must not drag Darren down, and needs to do our best to help Darren. Otherwise, aren't we useless? Everyone nodded their heads with expressions of agreement. Sun Bao nodded his head inside, and said in a deep voice, "So, I and Master Sun Bao have decided to gather all the strength of the camp to forge a talisman. The 500th type." An exhausted Zhuo Mo collapsed onto the ground. Zhuo Mo had furiously cultivated the little Yao arts just so he could get that spell from Pu Yao as soon as possible. If they entered this fiendish mist, the ones in most danger were Vermilion Bird Camp and Golden Crow Camp. Entering the fiendish mist was truly stepping into the inner span on the ancient battlefield. Even though it was dangerous up ahead, but Zhuo Mo saw more hope than in the desolation that he had seen these previous days. Pu Yao also supported this. The closer they were to the center of the battlefield, the more likely he could recognize where they were. Unless they could find a working transportation formation, finding the general position of this Jie was their only hope of leaving this place. The bean-sized beads of sweat gathered in streams that flowed down his face. Zhuo Mo didn't wipe them off, and said in a hoarse voice, "Pu, spell." "All right." Pu Yao did not waste words and briskly handed over a jade scroll. Grabbing the jade scroll, Zhuo Mo felt he had recovered some energy and forced himself up to run towards Vermilion Bird Camp. Behind him, Pu Yao's eyes flashed with an unusual light. He imperceptibly murmured, "Divine summon art, really makes me anticipate." In front of Gongsun Cha, Vermilion Bird Camp finished their organization. Everyone was silent and their eyes were full of anticipation. This was the first time they had gathered after entering this ghastly place. Was there a mission? Many people couldn't help but feel excitement. These battle maniacs felt moldy after spending every day on the boats. From today, all of your training missions are temporarily cancelled, and changed to cultivating this spell. Gongsun Cha smiled slightly, and then Zhong Ru and the others beside him quickly handed jade scrolls to every person. Everyone had a puzzled expression. Cultivate a new spell. But they suppressed their curiosity and remained motionless. Take a look. Only when Gongsun Cha said these words did they hurry to read the jade scroll in their heads. Fiend Ling, Gongsun Cha saw the shock and joy on all the faces, and smiled. With this spell, the combat abilities of Vermilion Bird Camp would not drop but go up a level. However, his own strength. His gaze turned to Zhuo Shixiang who was cultivating in the distance and suddenly smiled. After some more time, maybe he could give Zhuo Shixiang a surprise. The troop camped down at the border of the fiendish mist. The entire camp was busy. Even Zhuo Mo was cultivating. With the fiendish mist in front of their eyes, there was nothing else that could motivate Zhuo Mo even more. If he increased his strength by a fraction, then his chance of surviving would increase by a fraction. Motivated by the looming threat of impending doom, Zhuo Mo uncovered his own potential, and progressed quickly. Right now, he had cultivated to the third transformation of the Great Daimo physique, Day Script Palm. He felt very excited at the power of this move. This move would gather an enormous golden palm over 10 zhang in size. Under a palm strike, half of a mountain peak would disappear. Even Xie Shan and Xu Long couldn't help but turn pale when they saw Zhua Mo perform this move. Xie Shan rejoiced greatly now that he hadn't let achieving Jindan go to his head. He didn't know where Darren had learned this strange moves from. Each move was enormously powerful. He was certain if he fought against Darren, he had no chance of victory. The longer he stayed with Zhua Mo, the more respect and awe Xie Shan felt. In his eyes, Zhua Mo was filled with mysteries and enigmas. Zhua Mo's face was dusty. The palm of his hand hurt like it had been sliced with a blade. 3 golden lines could be made out on his palm. Relative to the power of the day script palm, was its cultivation difficulty. Zhua Mo needed to cultivate to the point that his entire hand was covered in golden lines that formed a network. At that point, the day script palm could be considered somewhat complete. Each transformation of the 6 transformations of the Great Daimo physique was vast profound, easy to learn but hard to master. Pu Yao was unusual in that he did not disturb Zhua Mo's cultivation of Great Daimo physique. Did this guy also know it was dangerous up ahead? Zhua Mo was slightly reassured. If Pu Yao went crazy, no one could stop him. He raised his head and saw that everyone else was focusing on their cultivation. He was instantly filled with motivation. So what if it was the fiendish mist? With this group of brothers, even if it was places more dangerous than the fiendish mist, he was not afraid. Having understood something, Zhua Mo said to 10th grade that was playing with Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire, 10th grade, you have to work on your cultivation, and do not slack off. 10th grade felt humiliated and his little face dropped. He looked with trepidation at Silly Bird, and coincidentally saw a cold light flash through the small crack of Silly Bird's eye as she was resting. 10th grade's body froze, and fully felt the impact of Lil Pagoda's nudge. Lil Pagoda was so excited it spun, and Lil Fire chirped happily from the side. Silly Bird glanced at 10th grade and then closed her eyes. 10th grade felt coldness shoot up from his spine and turned back to docilely play with Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire. Zhua Mo did not detect the strangeness of it. In his view, it was normal for 10th grade to play with Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire. He turned his face, and looked with concern at Ague. Grabbing Ague's hand, a thread of consciousness was put into her body. Zhua Mo frowned. The purple light inside Ague's body was very weak and showed no signs of strengthening. However, what reassured him was that the black fiendish energy had no effect on Ague. Zhua Mo marveled at this point. Ague's spells and secret techniques were strange and profound. Even Pu Yao, who thought himself as knowledgeable, did not know of its origins. However, Zhua Mo did not care about all that. Ague, we will definitely get out. Zhua Mo's voice was not loud, but was filled with determination. 10th grade was filled with humiliation. To him whose goal was to become 10th grade, it was a great blow to submit to Silly Bird's power even if it was done out of helplessness. He had originally assumed he was Master's strongest Ling beast, but he hadn't thought there would be one even stronger. Truthfully, 10th grade did not like Silly Bird at all. This narcissistic and show-off bird had a cold attitude towards Master, and should be executed for. He had the thought multiple times of taking care of this silly bird for Master. He hadn't expected he would be taken care of first. He wasn't just taken care of, but like an idiot, he had to play with these children of low intelligence. Such a dark life. Lil Pagoda didn't know 10th grade's depressed mood. It was playing very happily. Having successfully nudged 10th grade just now, both it and Lil Fire were greatly motivated to continue playing. That was the first time they had managed to catch 10th grade. Without noticing, the 3 little ones gradually neared the fiendish mist. 10th grade was enveloped in his low mood after being dominated, while Lil Pagoda and Lil Fire had completely gone off playing. No one noticed the arrival of danger. A dark red light suddenly flew out of the fiendish mist, and accurately struck Lil Pagoda. The happily playing Lil Pagoda suddenly froze and dropped down like dead weight. This dark red light rolled up like the long tongue of a monster and pulled Lil Pagoda to burrow back into the fiendish mist. This change happened without warning and was lightning fast. Another dark red light leapt out at Lil Fire, and was going to strike Lil Fire. 10th grade finally reacted by this time. The dark little face filled with killing intent, the two eyes glaring angrily as the flying black crescent blade turned to a black light and struck the red light. The red light hissed and fled towards the fiendish mist. Silly Bird suddenly opened her eyes, viciousness flashing through both of her eyes. With a call, her figure disappeared. Chapter 333, Fiend's Soul. Tied with an explosive sound echoing through the air, Silly Bird darted off like a grey bolt of lightning and headed into the fiendish mist. A piercing wail came out of the fiendish mist as the red light that 10th grade wounded suddenly exploded into dots of red light. Among the red dots, Silly Bird stood with murderous eyes. Yet Lil Pagoda's figure had disappeared. The killing intent in Silly Bird's eyes grew. The grey feathers on her forehead stood on end. 10th grade flew next to Silly Bird, his face heavy. The black crescent blade danced around his body, killing energy spreading outwards in threads. Even if he was at odds with Silly Bird and the others, but they were all mastersling beasts. Even more, the change had occurred right in front of his eyes. How could he not be angry? Without any hesitation, Silly Bird's large eyes narrowed, and like an arrow, she charged into the fiendish mist. 10th grade's face froze. He jumped up, turning into a black light, and entered the fiendish mist. Everyone else was alerted and prepared to enter the fiendish mist. Do not go in. Zhuomo's voice came from behind them. They saw Zhuomo's face full of suppressed pain, and he sat down cross-legged immediately after saying this. Everyone stared at each other. Many people had panicked expressions. Zhuomo's present situation was not very good. Lil Pagoda was his soul-tethered talisman, and was connected in mind with him. The moment that Lil Pagoda was attacked, Zhuomo felt it. The injuries that Lil Pagoda had taken also affected Zhuomo. Zhuomo felt his mind was shaken and had almost shattered. Shocked, he instantly sank into his mind. A thread of his mind connected him with the distant Lil Pagoda. Zhuomo's consciousness was not weak, and his mind was strong. Even though he shook, he quickly steadied, and the connection with Lil Pagoda cleared up. But Zhuomo was not happy at all and felt terrible. His connection to Lil Pagoda had not been cut off, but no matter how he called out mentally, Lil Pagoda did not respond. Gritting his teeth, Zhuomo put a thread of his mind, he entered Lil Pagoda's body. When his mind entered Lil Pagoda's body, Zhuomo finally understood how terrible the situation was. The balls of pure 5-element energies inside the pagoda had stopped moving and hung motionless inside the void of the pagoda. Usually, the pure 5-element energies would be in balance, creating and subduing each other, as they spun endlessly to form a simple yet wondrous little 5-element world. Zhuomo was clear on the wondrous process of the 5-element being created and destroyed within the pagoda. How could he not be shocked finding that the pure 5-element energies inside Lil Pagoda's body had stopped moving? The amount of pure 5-element energies inside Lil Pagoda was hundreds of times larger than when Zhuomo had first bought it. This enormous amount had come from Lil Pagoda's continuous deconstruction of talismans and materials. Zhuomo could see the 5-element marrow that was being formed out of the 5-elemental energies. Eventually these 5-element marrow would reach a critical mass and it would form small amounts of 5-element base source. Every bit of 5-element base source was unusually valuable and powerful. Lil Pagoda's body was filled with abundant pure 5-element energies, and even contained a small amount of 5-element marrow, but it had not created any 5-element base source yet. Zhuomo took a deep breath. He had no way to push the gigantic balls of pure five-element energies floating above his head. He was the owner, but it had always been Lil Pagoda itself that had always controlled the circulation of pure five-element energies. The most effective method was for Lil Pagoda itself to recover. However, he still did not know what Lil Pagoda had been wounded by. He could feel the existence of Lil Pagoda, could enter Lil Pagoda's body, but was unable to communicate with Lil Pagoda. Pu Yao suddenly appeared next to Zhuamo. It is a fiend soul. Pu Yao stared at the 5 balls of 5-element pure energy in the void, and said faintly, "This 5-element pagoda is filled with intelligence, and is irresistible to fiend souls." Fiend souls. Zhuamo didn't have the time to ask how Pu Yao could come in and hurriedly asked, "What does this have to do with fiend souls?" Fiend souls are born from the fiendish mist, and over time, they will form a slight intelligence. When they become more intelligent, they will start to process fiendish energy and become fiend soul beasts. Pu Yao looked back and said gravely, "Fiend souls love materials and talismans that have intelligence the most. They can slowly corrupt it and make it their own so they can quickly progress to becoming fiend soul beasts." Zhuamo's eyes turned cold. They usually kill each other to capture the intelligence and to continuously become stronger. Not just fiend souls do this, fiend soul beasts also do this. Pu Yao reminded him, "You have to be careful. I've never seen a fiend mist cloud of this size. The number of fiend souls contained in it should be astounding." As Pu Yao's voice landed, Zhuamo's expression suddenly changed. Because he saw 3 red lights. It was the first time Zhuamo had seen a fiend soul. They were like balls of mist covered in a layer of blood-red fiend mist. From afar, they looked like curving red worms of various sizes. The longest was 1 qi, and the smallest was not even half a cun in size. The vicious and destructive presence that each one had was like the dark wind from hell that filled every part of the void. Zhuamo could feel the primitive and innate viciousness killing intent in the fiend souls. Suddenly, Zhuamo thought of being at Wukong Mountain and using Art of Aged Gold to kill worms inside the Ling grains. The presence of those pests could not compare to these fiend souls, of course, but he was far more powerful than he was in the past. After experiencing so many battles, would Zhuamo become timid and panicked by such a little scene? Zhuamo was preparing to activate light void wings to smash these 3 fiend souls when he suddenly remembered that he was just a bit of soul at the moment. How could he activate light void wings? However, he reacted quickly, and raised his hands for 3 bolts of young fiendish hard lightning. Pia pia pia. The 3 bolts of young fiendish hard lightning accurately hit the 3 fiend souls. The 3 fiend souls didn't even have the time to wail before they were destroyed. Zhuamo released a breath. So these fiend souls were paper tigers. They made a lot of noise, but they weren't even worth a single blow. So when he saw 6 fiend souls burrow in, he did not hesitate to continue casting young fiendish hard lightning. Fiend souls continuously crawled and so Zhuamo continuously cast young fiendish hard lightning. After a few dozen bolts, his expression became ugly. The fiend souls did not amount to much individually, but their numbers continuously increased as they burrowed in. Zhuamo was just being supported by a thread of consciousness at the moment. The young fiendish hard lightning was strong, but it expended a lot of spiritual power. If it continued like this, he wouldn't be able to continue for much longer. Use the little Yao arts, Pu Yao reminded idly from the side. Zhuamo's hand shook, and he was instantly furious. Pu Yao, what do you mean? Are you just standing aside and watching? Pu Yao spread his hands and shrugged, his face full of helplessness. It isn't that I don't want to help, but I can't. This is your soul-tethered talisman. You who can use Ling power here, but no other person can. It wasn't easy for me to come in. If I acted, it won't be the fiend souls, but these 5 big guys above will instantly attack me. Pia pia pia. Large amounts of multicolored light flew out of the 5 balls of 5-element pure energy. These 5 colored energies were like sword energies and were very sharp. When they hit a fiend's soul, the fiend's soul would instantly be destroyed. In the blink of an eye, a large patch had been cleared. Seeing the situation, Mo was overjoyed. The pressure on him would lessen if these 5 balls of 5-element pure energy could automatically defend themselves. Pu Yao naturally understood what Mo was thinking, and poured cold water. Don't be prematurely happy. The number of fiend souls in this fiendish mist is much higher than you can imagine. As he said, the number of fiend souls that crawled in increased dramatically. Mo's heart beat wildly. The fiend souls were like an endless tide. The defense of the pure 5-element energies were still just as sharp, but Mo could see that the pure 5-element energies were smaller than before. If it continued like this, Mo instantly felt panic. The fiend souls that burrowed in covered all the spaces as they furiously leapt at the pure 5-element energies. Some even leapt at Mo. Damn it. Just as Mo was stuck on what to do, Pu Yao's reminder sounded at his ears, use little Yao arts. Pu Yao's voice was not idle like before and was full of panic. Inside the fiendish mist, an enormous blood-colored twister was forming. The fiend mist seemed to suddenly wake up and became restless. Countless fiend souls came from all directions and furiously charged at this twister. At the center of this blood-red twister, Lilith Pagoda rolled among countless fiend souls. This fiend souls furiously tried to burrow into the pagoda, but there were so many fiend souls that no more could enter. The countless fiend souls formed a terrifying tide that pulled the flashing Lil Pagoda deeper into the fiendish mist. Such a large noise disturbed even the stronger fiend soul beasts inside the fiend mist. Countless pairs of eyes opened and flashed viciously. Silly Bird charged recklessly in the fiendish mist. For some unknown reason, the fiendish mist that was like poison to others couldn't come within 3 chi of Silly Bird. Everywhere she passed, the rolling red fiend souls seemed to have been frightened and rushed to dodge. Silly Bird's vicious eyes showed signs of panic. She charged in all directions and looked around to search for Lil Pagoda's figure. 10th grade's little body was like a fish in the water in the fiend mist. Inside the fiend mist, the black crescent blade that expanded to more than 10 zhang large. With a long black energy, it was like a powerful axe. What was most strange was that this enormous black axe seemed to have a powerful magnetism that stopped fiend souls from struggling and sucked them in. 10th grade's expression was serious. The blood-red hair floated up like a ball of flame. Little Yao arts. Which type? Mo's hands did not stop moving as he rapidly asked. Number 76, and 313, use interlocking gold form, Pu Yao hurriedly said. The damned Pu Yao. Making Ji play with high difficulty moves at this time. Mo wanted to spit blood, but he didn't have the time to swear at Pu Yao now. The situation was becoming more dangerous. Several fiend souls had almost charged into the pure 5-element energies. He gritted his teeth and his hand movements changed. Number 76, number 313. Mo's eyes widened greatly. Gritting his teeth, his left hand was like water flowing that created threads of light, his right hand seemed to weigh 30,000 caddies, moving slow and heavy without sound. Mo tried to maintain the Yao arts on his 2 hands. The 2 little Yao arts alone did not pose any difficulty, but he instantly felt burdened when he casted them at the same time. The left hand that moved so rapidly it was blurring with light, and the quiet, snail-slow right hand was abnormally fitting, and strangely reached the front of his chest at the same time. Interlocking gold form. Mo boldened his heart and channeled all his consciousness. At the same time, his hands crossed, the left hand covered in thread of light like water flowing into the motionless right hand and tangled together. Pu Yao's bloody pupil suddenly widened. Chapter 334, archaic wasteland sacrificial art. Time seemed to suddenly slow at this moment. The threads of flowing light were like sprouting branches of light that slowly crept and wrapped around Zhuomo's empty right hand. Pu Yao's mind was suddenly pulled into his memories. Some blurry and distant scenes seemed to overlap onto what was happening in front of him, as though they had occurred yesterday. Teacher, with the imperceptible murmur, the edges and coldness within the bloody pupil disappeared. All of Zhuomo's attention was focused on the change occurring on his hands. He could feel a strange transformation taking formation in this short moment. What was this? This was just combining two kinds of little Yao arts. Compared to the young fiendish hard lightning that came from the little thousand-leaf hands, it wasn't just simple and low-level, there was no way to compare them. Little thousand-leaf hands contained all kinds of Yao arts and was created by a sky Yao. It was vast and profound. Even a person with his eyes at the top of his head like Pu Yao praised it. But little Yao arts. 500 kinds of little Yao arts. They were the essential contents every Yao had to cultivate. Any Yao must finish learning the 500 kinds of little Yao arts within their clan before they could enter the Yao art houses. In other words, little Yao arts were the most rudimentary knowledge of Yao cultivation. But the power that exploded between his hands. The last bit of light flowed from Zhuomo's left hand and wrapped onto his right hand. Hiss crack. Zhuomo suddenly felt blinding light burst forth in front of his chest. A power filled with destructiveness formed on his right hand like an ancient and wasteland great beast breathing an aged presence as it reared up and authoritatively gazed down upon those it tread beneath its feet. All of the fiend souls seemed to be paralyzed. Time seemed to stop inside the chaotic pagoda. As extreme movement turned to extreme calm, Pu Yao stared soullessly at Zhuomo's right hand, his murmur clear to hear. Archaic wasteland sacrificial art. Zhuomo didn't hear any of Pu Yao's murmur. He was shocked by the light and terrifying presence on his hand. He had completely lost the ability to think. He seemed to unconsciously move his right hand. He saw his right hand lightly sway easily like the flick of a fish's tail. Among the blinding light, an extremely faint shadow flew out of his right hand and suddenly grew. It was like a monster that suddenly opened its bloody maw and swallowed all the fiend souls inside the pagoda. In the fiendish mist, Lilith pagoda that was completely surrounded by fiend souls suddenly shot out countless blinding rays of light. An enormously strong suction force came from inside the tower. Tens of thousands of fiend souls were unable to run away and were instantly sucked into the pagoda. Just at the same time, a simple and bleak presence came from inside the pagoda. The fiend souls that had not been sucked in seemed to be frightened. They instantly scattered like there was a frightening monster inside Lil Paogda. In the deeps of the fiendish mist, those fiend soul beasts that were higher on the food chain wore frightened expressions in their faces. All of them laid on the ground, and didn't dare to move. Zhuomo felt very terrible now. The fiend souls were completely eaten, but he was stuffed full right now like he had eaten too much. What caused him to panic even more was that these fiend souls hadn't died, and were just restrained in a layer of this strange power. If this power lost control of these fiend souls, they would charge out again. Little Yao art number 1 and number 500, use straight pass-through form. Pu Yao's voice coincidentally arrived. Zhuomo's hands paused slightly. His first feeling was that it was not possible. Of the 500 little Yao arts, it encompassed almost all of the basics of Yao arts, and many of them had incompatible characteristics. Number 1 and 500 were the two Yao arts that had the most incompatible and conflicted attributes of almost all antithetical Yao arts. How could two antithetical little Yao arts be cast at the same time? But time did not permit him to think. After pausing, his hands uncontrollably moved according to Pu Yao's words. Number 1, number 500. A peerlessly strange feeling came. Zhuomo felt unspeakably awkward. He had felt awkward when he had cast number 76 and number 313 at the same time. Compared to that, his feeling of awkwardness was multiple times stronger. What method was this? Zhuo endured the peerlessly awkward feeling and managed to cast the two little Yao arts together. Pu Yao's bloody pupil stared unblinkingly at the coiling light that formed in front of Zhuo, and unconsciously stopped breathing. He appeared as though he feared his breath would frighten this enchanting and grand light. The two hands that he usually liked to hide in his sleeves unconsciously extended outwards. His expression was also very strange. It was filled with anticipation, but was also as though he was facing a great enemy. The strong feeling of awkwardness increased as the light rose. Zhuo felt as though his body was being twisted from the left and right in opposite directions. He knew this was a false feeling. At this time, he was just a thread of soul, what body was there to twist and contort? But he also knew this feeling of conflict actually existed. This was the conflict between laws. As soon as he casted them, he knew it wasn't good. Under the effect of two extreme laws, if he wasn't careful, he would be ground to powder at any time. Under the conflict between two basic laws, this bit of his consciousness was as weak as paper. His mind was being supported on this thread of consciousness. If this was destroyed, his outcome would not be any different than death. The hardest injury to heal was an injury to the soul. A Gue was wounded in the soul, and was left like a puppet. Was he going to become like her? With the stimulation of death, Zhuo got a burst of energy from somewhere and forcibly calmed himself down. However, how could two such opposed Yao arts be combined using the straight pass-through form? Not possible. It was completely impossible. In a flash, countless thoughts flashed through his mind, but he still did not know what to do with the two little Yao arts in front of him. The two little Yao arts were simple and straightforward. Any change in the two were noticed by his awareness, but due to this, he increasingly felt it was impossible. The two were like two carriages that were rushing in opposite directions. Right now, he had to pull them together. How was it possible? Impossible, impossible. Zhuo panicked. The two little Yao arts started to conflict. He was able to feel every conflict that happened between the two forces. The feeling of danger grew like there was a sword hanging above his head. He was unable to move, and right now, there was a mouse gnawing on the rope holding the sword. Calm, he had to be calm. Zhuo's breathing almost stopped. He told himself repeatedly to be calm, he forced himself to calm. What to do, what to do? Suddenly, it was like a bolt of lightning from the sky. He suddenly recalled the spell formation that he had created in the past. In that variety of spells and sword scriptures, there were also conflicting and incompatible spells and sword scriptures, but he had successfully merged them together. That heterogeneous spell formation was what he had bet on with Pu Yao to win the 6 transformations of the Great Damo physique. It was a pity that he had thrown that set of spell formations to the side when he got the Great Damo physique 6 transformations and concentrated on cultivating the 6 transformations. Zhuo had no time to regret why he hadn't kept on working with the spell formations. He worked his brain and tried to remember how he had merged those incompatible spells and sword scriptures into the formation at the time. He thought of how he had controlled those conflicting spells. His mind moved. Ignoring the ever-increasing feeling of danger, he patiently felt every bit of conflict between the two little Yao arts. His consciousness suddenly split into two like two thin whips, and used two completely different powers to insert into the light of the two little Yao arts. A strange transformation occurred. The two powers that had been furiously conflicting with each other used a strange form and started to spin in opposite directions. Light lit up in Zhuo's eyes. The conflict between the two little Yao arts decreased and the distance between the two lights decreased. There was none of the enmity and conflict seen before. They were like twins that gathered together. Moving naturally, Zhuo's hands seemed to be controlled by something and used the straight pass-through form. A force that was not strong accurately passed through the center of the two little Yao arts. Zhuo instantly understood. The light of Pu Yao's bloody pupil was as deep as the ocean. He looked dazedly at the strange yet familiar power in front of Zhuo Mo and lightly breathed 3 words. Divine Summoning Art. The shape on front of Zhuo Mo's chest was like that of a millstone. The light clearly divided into black and white suddenly created a strong suction. This suction was so strong that even Pu Yao was affected. His black robe flapped as it was pulled. Pu Yao's bloody pupil lit up, his figure remaining motionless. The strange power that had been enveloping the fiend's souls was like a cat that smelled fish, impatiently chasing the countless fiend's souls towards this strange black and white millstone. The black and white lights were like the upper and lower parts of the millstone. With astounding speed, it silently crushed countless fiend souls. The fiend souls did not even have the time to wail before they were completely crushed. Dots of white light floated off the millstone. Zhuo Mo's mind moved and he started, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation. The dots of white light gathered from all directions like raindrops and entered his body. At the same, the white light that Zhuo Mo did not absorb entered the 5 balls of 5-element pure energies. Zhuo Mo's entire body was enveloped in the white light to the point his figure was indistinct. Pu Yao's black robe flapped. His bloody pupil stared without movement at Zhuo Mo. He just stood there silently without a word. Silly bird who had been running around in the fiendish mist suddenly turned her head. The vicious eyes slowly became gentle until she resumed her usual lazy and proud state. She idly turned and strutted her bird walk. There was none of the killing energy that had just been present. Riding the black crescent blade that was like a huge axe, 10th grade's little face suddenly stilled. Feeling it in his mind, he did not hesitate to ride the black crescent and turn. His speed was suddenly raised to its limit as he cut through the heavy fiendish mist, howling by. In the fiendish mist, Lilith Pagoda was covered in a layer of faint white light. The fiendish mist in the surroundings was separated out. Just at this time, Zhuo Mo opened his eyes within the pagoda. Chapter 335, Gaines opening his eyes, joy flashed across Zhuo Mo's eyes. The richness of his gains this time far surpassed his imagination. Each fiend's soul was refined to powder, leaving behind only the purest thread of soul-based source. Soul-based source like this was so valuable that every Xiuzhi dreamed about obtaining it. The thread of consciousness that was Zhuo Mo at this moment was forcibly expanded at an exponential rate. Savoring the intoxicating taste, Zhuo Mo seemed to have just tasted gourmet food. Other than satisfaction, he wanted to taste it again. However, this thread of greed spun once in his mind before disappearing. He cared more about Lil Pagoda's situation. Of all the little ones, Lil Pagoda was the most obedient and the one that Zhuo Mo liked the most. However, when his gaze turned to the 5 enormous balls of pure 5-element energies above his head, he couldn't help but release a breath. There was none of the slowness and stiffness from before. The pure 5-element energies spun continuously. A simple yet profound 5-element power was displayed in front of him. Before he could examine it closely, a 5-colored light suddenly flew in front of him. It was Lil Pagoda. Seeing Lil Pagoda was uninjured, Zhuo Mo instantly smiled. He grabbed Lil Pagoda, and said in concern, "My good son, you are all right." He found that Lil Pagoda seemed to have slightly changed. Other than becoming more round in shape, the feeling was much softer, and the 5-element marrow were much rounder than before and twinkled with light. Lil Pagoda snuggled in Zhuo Mo's hands and rolled around to prove it was fine. A lively and fawning thought was communicated into Zhuo Mo's mind. Zhuo Mo couldn't resist grinning. Zhuo Mo quickly found to his shock that Lil Pagoda was more lively and smarter than before. The thoughts that Lil Pagoda passed to him were clearer and it had a wider variety of emotions. It seemed that he wasn't the only one that had benefited this time. When he looked around, Zhuo Mo made a sound of surprise when he looked at the pure 5-element energies. His mind was connected with Lil Pagoda. In his eyes, the pure five-element energies were transparent. There were basket-sized inner cores within the pure five-element energies. This was five-element marrow. Such large balls of five-element marrow. Suemo drooled when he saw them. Five-element marrow was a very rare kind of marrow. Even the tiniest bit was very valuable. Feeling the desire in Suemo's heart, the 5 large balls of 5-element marrow instantly floated in front of Suemo. Seeing the 5 enormous balls of 5-element marrow, it would be a lie to say he didn't covet it, but when Suemo saw the obedient and adorable Lil Pagoda beside him, his heart warmed and the greed disappeared. Suemo rubbed Lil Pagoda's head, and said with a smile, "All right, put them back. They are for you." Lil Pagoda seemed puzzled that Suemo wanted them, yet he refused. Only with 5-element marrow can you create 5-element base source in the future. When you have 5-element base source, our Lil Pagoda will be very strong. Lil Pagoda didn't quite understand, but it could feel Suemo's happiness, so it happily flew around Suemo. Bam! Suemo felt the world shake. His heart shook. Had they come again? When he spread out his consciousness, he found it was Silly Bird that had created the disturbance. Silly Bird seemed to know Suemo was watching her. She rolled her eyes and ignored him. Holding Lil Pagoda in her beak, she raised her wings and headed straight for the camp. Along the way, she encountered 10th grade. When 10th grade saw Silly Bird holding Lil Pagoda in her beak, his little face eased slightly. But his expression quickly became extremely ugly. Silly Bird was like a bolt of lightning that flashed by him and disappeared. That speed! Gritting his teeth, he pushed the Black Moon to its limits and chased the whole way, but he still couldn't see Silly Bird's back. Last time, 10th grade had not accepted his defeat at Silly Bird's claws. But the speed that Silly Bird displayed today made him feel suffocated. Detecting the difference in ability, it did not discourage 10th grade but lit up his motivation. If he couldn't defeat a bird, how could he reach the peak of 10th grade? On the Black Moon, 10th grade balled his fists, pressed his lips together, his tender face was filled with determination. At the same time Silly Bird carried Lil Pagoda back to camp, Suemo woke up from his meditation. When the enormous thread of consciousness returned to his body, it was like an abundant stream of water flowing into a deep pond. The level of water in the pond instantly exploded. Suemo was so comfortable he wanted to groan. 3 times. The consciousness in his body had grown 3 times over. This was a number that almost drove Suemo insane. When he opened his eyes, he felt as though he had a fantastical dream. Multiplying 3 times in one night. He had never heard of such an impossible matter, and it had happened on his body. He rushed to find Pu Yao. "Pu, what happened?" Pu Yao's expression was calm and he did not look any different than usual. He twisted his mouth. "Nothing, you have good luck." Seeing the enthusiasm on Suemo's face, Pu Yao, who hadn't prepared to say more, suddenly saw the scene of Suemo casting the little Yao arts in front of him. He thought and then said, "Fiend souls are created from remnant threads of soul. You absorbed their soul base source. It is the first time I have seen something like this." He did not lie. Only a fiendish mist of such scale could form such a large number of fiend souls. Everything here was far out of Pu Yao's imagination. So fiend souls can nurture the consciousness. Suemo's eyes lit up. Good thing. Good thing. Pu Yao saw Suemo and knew what he was planning. To other people, these fiend souls were very dangerous, and their minds would be easily corroded if they were not careful. It was not a simple matter to forge fiend souls into pure soul base source. Yes, fiend souls were created by that thread of soul, but these soul remnants were the convictions of those that died, and contained all kinds of negative emotions. Over long periods of slaughter and fighting, they became even more vicious and dangerous. Would it be an easy matter to process them? Unless. Pu Yao looked dazedly at Suemo. Even though he had speculations and anticipation before, but when he saw Zhuemo cast the archaic wasteland sacrificial art with his own eyes, the blow of shock he received was stronger than anyone else. He suddenly turned and glanced at the gravestone. Many of the previous incidents had just been him acting rashly in anger against the gravestone, but now the gravestone seemed to detect Pu Yao's thoughts. The black energy suddenly grew. Immersed in his wonderful dreams, Zhuemo noticed the abnormality of the gravestone. He pointed with shock at the gravestone and asked Pu Yao with a curious expression, "What is it doing?" Pu Yao's mood suddenly became good. Glancing at the gravestone, he snicked, "Oh, he saw your consciousness improved greatly and is happy for you." "Oh." Zhuemo understood and then asked, "Right, Pu, what are the 2 moves you taught me today called?" "They are very powerful." Looking at Zhuemo, Pu Yao felt even better and looked, with mirth at the corner of his mouth, at the gravestone. "Before, I did not compete with you, but now." The mirth at his lips disappeared. He turned his gaze to Zhuemo, and raised an eyebrow. "How is it? Nice to use? Not lacking compared to the great Daimo physique?" "Not lacking, not lacking." Zhuemo rubbed his hands and snickered. "Have you not clearly seen the true quality of this person? This person would call anyone that gives him milk mother." Pu Yao was very smug. "But my path overall has more of a future than your road. Teacher, are you happy?" Countless thoughts flashed through Pu Yao's mind. Zhuemo found to his surprise that Pu Yao's expression had become stern. "It is called the archaic wasteland sacrificial art." Pu Yao's voice was deep. "Just like, little thousand-leaf hands, it is an entire set of Yao arts, and was created by another Sky Yao, my teacher." "Your teacher?" Zhuemo was very shocked. Pu Yao would rarely speak of the past. This was the first time Pu Yao had spoken of his own history. "Yes, my teacher." Pu Yao had an reminiscent expression. His expression was stern without any of the nonchalance he usually had. He looked focusedly at Zhuemo. "Zhuemo, are you sure you want to learn?" Pu Yao's complete shift in attitude caused Zhuemo to feel the unusual nature of this matter. He didn't agree immediately and asked cautiously, "Pu, to learn this set of archaic wasteland sacrificial art, are there any requirements?" "Very simple, you accept the succession of this branch." "Can you be more concrete?" Zhuemo carefully asked. "Concrete?" Pu Yao stilled. He had never thought about the problem of accepting students. Being asked by Zhuemo now, he didn't know what to say. He tilted his head and thought back to when teacher had accepted him. "Before you accept students, you must travel to the first Yao art house of the Yao realm and enter your name into the Sky Yao pavilion." Thinking about it, Pu Yao suddenly felt ashamed. He remembered the hopes teacher had for him. Even though he had become a Sky Yao, but due to other reasons, he had not realized teacher's hopes. This demand surprised Zhuemo. "Oh, you don't need me to swear an oath." "Not necessary." "No rules?" "No." "No restrictions?" "No." The more Zhuemo asked, the stranger he felt the situation was. This sect, in his understanding, it was a sect. The requirements for acceptance for this sect was really low. As to being entered in Sky Yao Pavilion, Zhuemo didn't think of it as an important matter. Accept students? That matter had nothing to do with him. Sky Yao Pavilion, who even knew what that was? But as long as he did not accept students, that had nothing to do with him. By the end of the inquiry, Zhuemo still didn't quite believe it. Were Yao sects so easy to enter? In Shilja sects, every disciple had their duties, each needed to contribute to the sect in order to receive benefits. Yet Pu Yao's sect didn't need any service and he could get benefits. It was so strange. After thinking for a while, Zhuemo felt there was only one possibility left. Pu Yao's sect was definitely a pitifully small sect. Only the lowest and smallest sects would be so indiscriminating. Spat spat spat. Suemo found that he was now a part of the sect, and hurriedly stopped. However, he had found the differences after such a contrast. The gravestone had something like oaths to abide by and probably originated from a large sect, which was why it had so many rules. Pu Yao's sect was so loose and definitely was a small one. Oh, if I learn the archaic wasteland sacrificial art, can I still cultivate the great Daimo physique? Suemo shamelessly asked. Chapter 336, Tri Pu Yao stared at Suemo without speaking. Suemo felt uncomfortable under the gaze and smiled weakly. It would be a pity to not cultivate the great Daimo physique. After being stared at while, just as Suemo thought Pu Yao was going to be angry, Pu Yao suddenly spoke, "I have to think about this." Even though Pu Yao didn't immediately answer, Suemo still saw hope. He hurriedly left the sea of consciousness. Once Suemo left the sea of consciousness, large amounts of black mist came out of the gravestone. Figures flitted across the surface of the stone. Pu Yao seemed to not see them, and spoke to himself, "Cultivate Yao and Mo together, this idea is quite interesting." The relationship between Yao and Mo was much closer than with Xiuzhe, but the two of them had never heard of a person cultivating Yao and Mo at the same time. Pu Yao was a knowledgeable Yao, and the archaic wasteland sacrificial art was a lost and great knowledge. But the great Daimo physique was also a high-ranking Mo physique. If Suemo had not successfully cultivated it, Pu Yao definitely wouldn't rack his brains over the issue. But since Suemo had successfully cultivated the great Daimo physique, it would really be a pity to throw it away. Yao cultivation was the most free and liberal of all three cultivations. Education methods like the Yao art houses were much more liberal than the sect succession of the Xiuzhe or the clan succession of the Mo figures flashed across the gravestone. You feel it is possible to try? Pu Yao raised an eyebrow in puzzlement. He sank into thought. He had all kinds of anger and dissatisfaction with the gravestone, but being the one to guard the gravestone for tens of thousands of years, the other was a significant factor. The gravestone had many places that he felt were stupid, stubborn, and too conservative, but he was familiar with the accomplishments and knowledge the gravestone had. Pu Yao became unusually hesitant. Since Suemo could comprehend the divine summoning art on his own, he was perfect for cultivating the archaic wasteland sacrificial art, and was the best successor. If Suemo focused on cultivating the archaic wasteland sacrificial art, there was a high possibility that he could reach the stage of a Sky Yao. But if he cultivated the Mo physique and the Yao art at the same time, it was hard to predict the outcome. The journey of cultivating Mo physique was the most dangerous of the three paths. His soul would be destroyed due to the slightest carelessness. The flashing shadow of a person on the surface of the gravestone silently waited for Pu Yao's decision. Pu Yao glanced at the gravestone out of the corner of his eyes. Its silence, and the events that happened in the past flashed across his mind. His bloody pupil suddenly became deep, and an imperceptible sorrow floated at the deepest part of his eye. In a moment, his expression turned normal. He smiled mockingly and said, "What? Afraid your line of succession will end? Your set of stuff is so old its teeth is falling out, it should have been thrown into the trash a long time ago." Humph. If he wants to cultivate, then cultivate. I'm also slightly curious. TSK, Yao art, Mo physique, spells, formations, what kind of weirdo will this boy cultivate to become? A hint of insanity flashed across Pu Yao's bloody pupil. In the camp, after Suemo opened his eyes, everyone's hearts finally landed. However, this incident rang the alarm for everyone. This ghastly place was more dangerous than they had imagined. The people of Guard Camp worked even harder on their cultivation. The black fiendish energy had benefits for them. The black fiendish energy inside the fiendish mist was even denser, and harder to process. They had to carefully control the rate at which they absorbed fiendish mist. Otherwise, the fiendish mist would corrode their minds and they would gradually turn to fiend soul beasts. However, this was a good place to cultivate hardship guard. All of them progressed quickly. Another person cultivated and formed their weapon. This person was an unexpected surprise to everyone. It was actually a one. After Owen healed completely, he stayed with guard camp, and started cultivating hardship guard with everyone else. In guard camp, Owen had spent the shortest time cultivating hardship guard, but his progression rate was amazing. When Zhuo was informed that Owen had formed his weapon, he also jumped in fright. This talent was too outrageous. Owen's weapon was a spear. Its entire body was black without any light. A dark red tassel hung below the head of the spear like a dark flame. Once this black spear formed, Owen hugged it and sank into meditation. What also surprised Zhuo were the 300 flower slaves. After these flower slaves were rescued from 100 Flower Alliance, Xu Long had been taking care of them as they cultivated the Flower Yao mutual existence art. This Yao art was very wondrous. In a short period of time, they regained their clarity of mind and managed to suppress the Ling flowers planted on their bodies. The flowers that 100 Flower Alliance picked to grow on these flower slaves were all rare and valuable Ling flowers. These Ling flowers were all 5th grade, and by themselves were rare Ling objects that could automatically absorb the Ling energy in the surroundings. However, this place was thin in Ling energy and was filled with black fiendish energy. The Ling flowers on their bodies had all turned to absorbing black fiendish energy instead. It had to be said that everything in the world had their own abilities. The brutal and dark black fiendish energy was not dark at all after being absorbed by the Ling flowers, and became warm and lively. They progressed quickly. Compared to the guard camp being fishes in the water, the situation of Vermilion Bird Camp was not too good. Even though Zhuo had given them the scrolls of Fiend Ling, so they did not have to fear black fiendish energy as much as before, they still needed to cultivate it to a certain stage to regain their full combat abilities. Among them, the 16 Seal Xiu led by Gong Liangwei were the worst off. After they were captured in Little Mountain Jia, they had been put into Vermilion Bird Camp by Gong Sun Cha. However, due to their unique cultivating methods, their position in Vermilion Bird Camp was very awkward. At present, the combat tactic of Vermilion Bird Camp depended on speed and sharpness. This was the tactic that Sword Xiu were most skilled in. What Seal Xiu were more skilled in was support. Adding on that the spells they cultivated weren't anything profound, the increases they could provide were limited. To date, before they could act, the battle would be finished. Even though Gongsun Cha Darren put importance on them, it could not change the fact that they were in an awkward position. Their cultivation was at the bottom of Vermilion Bird Camp, and the Fiend Ling had high demands of cultivation. They found it even harder. "Why don't we ask Gongsun Cha Darren to move to Golden Crow Camp?" one of the people said with his head down. Gong Liangwei was silent. He was over his 40s, his talent was average, but due to his steadiness, he was the Shixiang of this group of people. He also knew that Golden Crow Camp was more appropriate for them at this time. They were skilled in all kinds of seal, and one among them called Li Zhuo was able to make 2nd grade seal soldiers. This was a great achievement for Ningmai level Seal Xiu. Seal Xiu were skilled in all kinds of seals, were skilled in formations and making all kinds of seals, and to attack through use of seals. In a Seal Xiu's normal cultivation, they needed to use all kinds of formations and seals. This was the point that they differed from other Xiuzha. This place was thin in Ling power. The formations that they needed for their cultivation could not perform fully, and their cultivation was not enough that they could cultivate Fiend Ling. As they spoke, Zhongru walked towards them. Gong Liangwei hurriedly stood and went up to welcome Zhongru. Zhongru was the leader of the Shield Guard platoon, and was responsible for Gongsun Darren's safety. He had a high position in Vermilion Bird Camp. Gong Liangwei was skilled in interaction, and did not show any of the trouble on his face. He said with a smile, "It is rare for Zhong Darren to come here, is there something you wish to order?" Zhong smiled warmly and passed over several jade scrolls. Gong Sun Darren has asked me to deliver some things to everyone. Gong Liangwei took the jade scrolls with slight puzzlement. What is worth Darren personally making a trip? Everyone will know after reading. After Zhong spoke, he raised his folded hands and left. Zhong cultivation deepened by the day, and was increasingly warm and subdued, like he was a normal person without any sharp edges. After Zhong left, everyone crowded over. Gong Liangwei's consciousness swept the jade scroll, and his body uncontrollably tensed. The jade scrolls on their hands were the jade scrolls Suemo had sent to Golden Crow Camp. The content on formations made everyone's eyes lit up. Gong Sun Cha was immersed in playing war chess every day. That mysterious person did not appear, so he studied by himself. Ever since he heard that battle generals had their cultivation spells, his thoughts started to wander. He was completely enchanted with the highly difficult profession of battle general. Since he did not have the spells that battle generals cultivated, then why couldn't he explore by himself? Gong Sun Cha's personality was a bit insane to begin with. He was always filled with interest and enthusiasm towards matters that normal people would find irrational. Creating battle general spells, another person wouldn't even dare to think of it, but he had no fear. However, in terms of knowledge of cultivation, he had a good grasp of his own limitations, but he also had his own solution: war chess. The craftsmanship of these war chess games were exquisitely detailed, and they closely mimicked to reality. The person that designed them definitely was a great battle general. Of course, the possibility it was a Yaomua general was great. However, this difference wasn't major in Gong Sun Cha's view. He tried to find hints and clues in the war chess games. He was curious how true battle generals cultivated. He had been immersed in this highly difficult pursuit recently. He had made discoveries. Pu Yao, who had been teaching Zuemo, suddenly raised his head, shock flashing through his bloody pupil. Zuemo stilled, raised his head and asked, "What is it?" "Oh, nothing." Pu Yao's expression turned normal. He looked at Zuemo. "You can continue to practice the great Damo physique. The condition is that your Yao art cultivation meets my demands." "What demands?" Zuemo weakly asked. Pu Yao gave a teeth-baring smile. "When I was in the Yao art house, I had a nickname." "Nickname?" Zuemo was dazed. "What nickname?" "They like to call me the Encyclopedia of Yao arts." The faint voice came from Pu Yao's shadowed face. A sharp smile flashed. "As my successor, you need to maintain this great tradition." A bad feeling washed over Zuomo's mind. "From today onwards, immerse yourself in the ocean of Yao arts." Pu Yao's arrogant voice threw Zuomo completely into hell. There were many kinds of Yao arts, and could not be counted. Just basic little Yao arts had 500 kinds, so the true scale could be imagined. Also, Pu Yao had no intentions of passing archaic wasteland sacrificial art onto Zuomo, and started to explain things beginning with little Yao arts. Zuomo found to his shock that the little Yao arts that he learned were more complicated and intricate than he had previously imagined. A completely different world started to reveal itself to him. Pu Yao had never spoken of Yao arts like this before. He was confident with each type of Yao art, free and high-flying. The person and Yao were immersed and completely forgot the flow of time. After an unknown number of days, they were suddenly disturbed. It was Golden Crow Camp. Chapter 337, Crimson Fiend Cauldron. The center of the slave-transporting boat had been completely transformed. The rooms on multiple floors had been completely torn down. Right now, what stood in their place was a double-handled red cauldron about 5 zhang tall. The crimson-red cauldron appeared to have been just taken from a strong fire. The shape was simple, but the presence was heavy. If one went closer, they would see that the body of the cauldron was covered in formation scripts written in the size of ants. The complexity would make one faint. If a Shouja skilled in forging saw this cauldron, they would be very shocked. Such small and complex formation scripts could not be completed even if a Jindan forging Shouja worked for 3 to 5 years. This enormous Crimson Fiend cauldron was the effort by all of the people in Golden Crow Camp. The body of the cauldron was made from a mixture of fire element materials like crimson fire rock. The great majority were 4th grade materials. The forging method to make the Crimson Fire cauldron was different than normal methods. After the plan had been confirmed, the large cauldron had been divided into 326 pieces. There had been clear discussion regarding the size of each piece and the seal scripts carved into them. Due to the fact the sizes of the parts were relatively small after being dismembered, the forging difficulty was much lower. Each piece was repeatedly forged, and each line on the seal scripts had been exquisitely planned. In other words, the large cauldron was a puzzle that was pieced together. The entire assembly process took 7 whole days and nights. Members of Golden Crow Camp forged without sleep and rest to finish. After that, the entire camp used Golden Crow fire to forge it for 14 days to melt it into one body. Today, the large cauldron took form. When every Golden Crow Camp member looked at this astounding large Crimson Fiend cauldron, their eyes were filled with head and pride. 5th grade. The grade of this large cauldron was 5th grade. When the masters announced this result, all of the camp cheered. 5th grade, that was enough for every person of Golden Crow Camp to feel proud. Golden Crow Camp did not have one Jindan in its ranks, all of them were Ningmai. Only Jindan Shouja, of at least the 2nd stratum, had the ability to forging 5th grade talismans. But Golden Crow Camp that had no Jindan at all did it. However, the cheers only continued for a short period of time. Everyone's expression turned serious because an even more crucial step was arriving. Black-red fiendish mist flowed towards the slave transporting boat like a tide. Inside the slave transporting boat, the mood was nervous, and the loud voices of the 2 masters could be heard. Pay attention and control the flow rate of the fiendish mist. Maintain the Golden Crow fire, keep it up. The fiendish mist that was absorbed turned to a slender black-red flow and entered the large cauldron. The Golden Crow fire within the cauldron seemed to have had a bucket of oil poured over it and grew. Everyone uncontrollably stopped breathing. The fine seal scripts on the Crimson Fiend cauldron suddenly shot up with gold light. A vast Ling power wave filled every corner of the slave transporting boat. The formations on the boat lit up at almost the same time. Only now did the hearts of Golden Crow Camp members land. Cheers suddenly exploded. Master Ji Wei's face was covered in tears. Sun Bao was also very emotional, swallowing hard and unable to speak. He felt it would be worth it even if he died now. Before Wan Tian had been urging Wei Qingbin to get some black fiendish energy, he and Sun Bao had already started to study the black fiendish energy. The jade scroll that Suemo had sent over had resolved many problems they could not overcome. Even though they had done this through the combined effort of the entire camp, but being able to forge such a cauldron when they were just Ningmai was enough to make them famous throughout the entire world. It wasn't just the 2 masters. The people of Golden Crow Camp came from small sects, and most were those that did not have great ambitions. Everyone was uncontrollably excited at being able to complete such an amazing work. Many people couldn't stop themselves from crying. When Zuemo rushed over, this was what he saw. Then his gaze was securely attracted to this 5 zhang tall Crimson Fiend cauldron, and was dumbstruck. You forged this? Zuemo pointed at the large cauldron and asked disbelievingly. Sun Bao said respectfully and with pride, yes, Darren. Zuemo was shocked. That was right, he was completely shocked. He couldn't be called skilled in formations, but his understanding of formations was far above everyone else. However, he was still amazed at the clever thinking behind the forging of the Crimson Fiend cauldron. The forging of the Crimson Fiend cauldron used Golden Crow fire, and what Suemo hadn't expected was that they actually put the Great Golden Crow formation onto this cauldron. This way, the golden crow fire inside the cauldron would be maintained for a long time and could gather golden crow fire from sunlight. In the future, there would be no need to worry about the supply of golden crow fire. As the amount of golden crow fire inside the cauldron increased, it was very likely that it could produce even higher grade flames. In other words, the crimson fire cauldron still had room to improve. But this wasn't what shocked Suemo the most. What gave him the greatest shock was the crimson fiend cauldron could process fiendish mist and turn it to Ling power. Wasn't this the method of Fiend Ling? Fiend Ling could transform fiendish energy to Ling power. Vermilion Bird Camp was furiously cultivating this spell, but who could have expected that Golden Crow Camp would walk ahead of them? A pretty good talisman. Pu Yao couldn't help but praise. The rich and lively Ling power inside the slave transporting boat made a person feel comfortable. In this place, black fiendish energy was in endless supply. With the Crimson Fiend Cauldron, they did not need to worry about the problem of Ling power at all. Their Jingshi supply could also provide Ling power, but there would be a day when it was all used up. The members of Golden Crow Camp all floated in this direction. Darren's shocked expression made them feel very good. Can you make a few more? Suemo asked Sun Bao. Sun Bao showed a difficult expression. It isn't hard to forge, but I'm afraid we cannot find suitable materials. In order to forge the Crimson Fiend Cauldron, all the rare materials from Bao Yi's stores had been swept clean. If it wasn't that Sun Bao and Ji Wei had both personally gone to demand them from Bao Yi definitely would not have given the materials up. Suemo was slightly disappointed, but he was not surprised. Low-grade materials could not endure such powerful Ling power and the domineering Golden Crow fire. I'm really greedy, Suemo said mockingly. He then said to Sun Bao and Ji Wei, good work. In the future, if you need any materials, go to Bao Yi to get them. If that bamboo stick won't give them to you, come find me directly. Sun Bao and Ji Wei were overjoyed. Thanks, Darren. To people that enjoyed forging, this promise made them happier than anything else. Golden Crow Camp gave Suemo a big surprise. With the Crimson Fire Cauldron, the pressure placed on him instantly decreased. They could be at more ease while exploring this strange place. Coming out of the slave transporting boat, Suemo was in a very good mood. He looked around. The camp was very busy. Everyone had not sunk into a depression but worked harder on their cultivation. Seeing the situation, Suemo started to cultivate himself. Becoming stronger was better than anything else. Pu Yao said that he had a nickname of the Encyclopedia of Yao Arts. Suemo felt that this nickname was a bit of an exaggeration. It wasn't the first time this guy liked to boast, but this guy really displayed his aptitude when he started to explain Yao Arts. 500 types of little Yao Arts. After Pu Yao explained them to him again, Suemo had a completely different perspective. However, Suemo cared more about the archaic wasteland sacrificial art. Pu, teach me another 2 moves of the archaic wasteland sacrificial art. Suemo raised his face and said fawningly. Pu Yao replied absent-mindedly, oh, don't try to always get free benefits. It's a dream to think that you can combine 2 little Yao arts to get something powerful. Then you can teach me some powerful Yao arts. You understand all of the little Yao arts? Pu Yao glanced at him. Pretty much. Suemo had some confidence about this. Really? Pu Yao had a slightly smile. Then let's test it. Test? What test? Suemo became alert. Before he finished asking, the scene in the surroundings seemed to retreat like a wave, and turn to a dark void. This was 10-finger prison. Damn it. Suemo didn't have the time to swear. His vision blurred and pushed the swear words at his mouth back. Your consciousness has become much stronger, and you should be able to stay for 12 hours now. Pu Yao did not waste words and said crisply. Walk forward using the method I taught you last time. I don't demand anything too highly of you. 12 hours, walk 30 li forward. Ooh, this demand is just 1/10 of mine when I first came here. Finishing, Pu Yao did not allow Zhuemo to speak and disappeared. Vast water clear skies, Zhuemo had come last time and wasn't unfamiliar with this place. According to Pu Yao, the entire vast water clear skies was constructed from 13,000 low-level Yao arts. Just 30 li, you think this will trouble GE? Provoked by Pu Yao's disdainful tone, Zhuemo did not procrastinate. He lowered his head and started to deconstruct the Yao art under his feet. Every bit of soil, every piece of rock, every stalk of grass here was made from Yao arts. His consciousness made a close inspection. The Yao arts here were completely different in Zhuemo's eyes than the ones from last time. Last time, if it wasn't for Pu Yao guiding him continuously, he couldn't have even advanced a single step. But right now, even facing low-level Yao arts he had never seen before, he could think of solutions. It was a great help to him that his consciousness was stronger than in the past. No wonder they said that the consciousness was the basis of Yao arts. Comparing the two visits, Zhuemo gave a direct and deeply ingraining experience. The Yao arts borrowed all kinds of powers from within the world. The consciousness was like a level that leveraged the power of the world. The first Yao art did not take Zhuemo long before he deconstructed it. Walking one step by one step, deconstructing one Yao art by one Yao art. This feeling was somewhat familiar. Zhuemo suddenly remembered why he found it familiar. In Wukong Mountain, he had also studied the questions of the preliminary formations, Jade Scroll from Kunlun. The feeling now was slightly similar. This was a little bit interesting. Zhuemo did not find it dull, but found it interesting. He gradually found some patterns, and his speed became faster. These low-level Yao arts had many transformations and he did not recognize the great majority of them. However, he found that if he used the right method, they were all able to be deconstructed using little Yao arts. Immersed in deconstructing Yao arts, he did not notice the scenery behind him that he just deconstructed was changing. Even more so, he did not notice a pair of eyes staring at him from nearby. Chapter 338, Nanyu looked with curiosity at the male in front of her. To be able to enter vast water clear skies in the first year of entering a Yao art house, she had some fame in the art house, even though the Yao art house that she belonged to was not a famed one. Even though she was very young, she was very experienced in vast water clear skies. Last time, she had accidentally found there was a place that showed major marks of damage and instantly took note. Only today when she saw this unfamiliar male did she instantly realize she found the culprit. She did not go up to warn him. She had stayed for a long time in vast water clear skies, and naturally had no problems with basic knowledge. The 10-finger prison was completely constructed from Yao arts. It included almost all the Yao arts. Due to this, it also became the place the Yao learned Yao arts. She had once learned 3 relatively powerful Yao arts from vast water clear skies, and many places in vast water clear skies that were filled with danger were good places to gain experience. Nanyu had encountered incidents of destruction before, but that was mostly when some Yao that destroyed the area after finding a good Yao art to prevent it from landing in another person's hands. This kind of destruction had no effect on vast water clear skies. Vast water clear skies was completely constructed from Yao arts. Any grass or art that was destroyed would be recreated. It was always kept at an equilibrium. 10-finger prison had existed for many years, and countless sky Yao had come through, but nothing had ever happened to 10-finger prison. What Nanyu found curious was that the other's strange actions looked more like a kind of cultivation method. But, what effect would it have? She sank into thought. It was not hard to destroy the grasses and plants of vast water clear skies. They were constructed out of Yao arts, and other than some rare defensive Yao arts, they were usually easily destroyed. Was this person a destructive maniac? She laughed. These days, there were all kinds of strange Yao. There were some weird Yao in her Yao art house. Supposedly, there were even more of these people at famed Yao arts houses. She really had too much free time that she would spend it on such a boring matter. Was it that she had good results in the recent tests that caused her to be slightly proud? She couldn't help but feel ashamed. She instantly warned herself to not be proud. Just as she was going to leave, she suddenly saw the process of the rock collapsing in front of the unfamiliar male. Her heart shook and paused mid-step. Just now, that rock had turned to powder without any warning and disappeared into the air. This was. Nan Yu's mouth was opened wide, her face written with disbelief as she looked dazedly at Suemo. Without any sound, another entire piece of rock collapsed at the exact same moment to the smallest bits of powder that dissipated into the air. After 3 whole breaths, Nan Yu finally reacted, and couldn't help but yell, "Deconstruction." When the words came out, she frightened herself. She hurriedly covered her mouth in fear of alarming the other. However, the other fortunately had not been disturbed and was still in a trance. After observing for a long time, Nan Yu was certain the other was deconstructing these Yao arts, and was not destroying them. If he used brute force to destroy these rocks made from Yao arts, the rock will just turn to a ball of light and then disappear. Deconstruction and destruction were two completely different concepts. Destruction was to damage from the outside, and deconstruction was to dismember from the inside, and cause it to be destroyed. The difficulty of deconstruction was far higher than destruction. It required a deep understanding of Yao arts. Vast water clear skies was only the first prison of 10-finger prison, and there were only low-level Yao arts here, but the Yao arts here were innumerable. How could one be familiar with all of them? The more Nan Yu saw, the more shocked she was. The speed the other deconstructed at made her heart beat wildly. The ever-changing Yao arts did not seem to be an obstacle to this male. His movements flowed without hurry. Everywhere he passed, the plants and grasses turned to dust and disappeared from beside his feet. He did not look, and he did not stop in his steps. Nan Yu was dazed as she watched. At the beginning, she had doubted if her guess had been accurate. Even those high-level students in the Yao art house wouldn't be so smooth and quick. This was a Darren. Darren was the general term for those powerful and profound Yao. Maybe this great Yao was trying a certain Yao art. Or he was trying to comprehending some secret technique. This was the only possibility that she was able to think of. Vast water clear skies was the first level of 10-finger prison. Most of those who came here were little Yao that had just entered the Yao art houses. There were only low-level Yao arts here, and were not of help to those powerful Yao. But the strength shown by this person far surpassed them. Nan Yu quickly realized this was a rare chance. She instantly thought rapidly how she could go up and initiate a conversation. In the Yao art houses, everyone liked to call situations like this wild wondrous encounters. The Yao arts houses publicly passed on many Yao arts, but these were the basic Yao arts of each Yao art level. As to the skills of each teacher, those were secret. Using the Purple Lotus Yao art house that Nan Yu belonged to as the example, they took in 2,000 students annually. After 5 to 7 years of education, they would graduate with results based on each person's consciousness and skill in the Yao arts. In these 5 to 7 years, those little Yao that studied hard and were talented might receive the favor of a certain teacher and become their student. Only these students had the possibility of receiving their line of succession. The teachers had the freedom to choose their students. Normally, the teachers only had to teach basic Yao arts to all the students. The best way to learn more profound Yao arts was to become the personal student of a teacher. However, the competition inside the Yao art house was very fierce. Every teacher was being targeted by countless students that wanted to enter their doors. Nan Yu's talent was not high. The reason she had the achieved grade she did was due to her hard work. The teachers of the schools were perceptive. How could they not see this? Right now, the teachers all hoped to pick students with talent. Students like her only had the tiniest of chances. Maybe this Darren was an opportunity. At this time, she had to be shameless. Nanyu thought of the stories and experiences that her elder classmates had passed on to her. Gritting her teeth, she went next to Zhuemo. However, she did not speak, but silently stood and did not make a sound. Zhuemo felt a thread of exhaustion. He stopped because he found that when he was tired due to manipulating his consciousness, his rate of deconstruction would quickly decrease. He turned his head back to look at the path he had just walked. In 1 hour, he had advanced about 2 li. Based on this rate, he would only make 24 li in 12 hours. There was quite a distance to the 30 li that Pu Yao set down. But Zhuemo was not in a hurry, and took the time of rest to recall the experiences. As the number of Yao arts he deconstructed increased, his speed moving forward had increased. He could clearly feel that the time he spent on the last li was much shorter than the time he spent on the first li. Even though each type of Yao art was different, he still understood and gradually became accustomed to the process. These Yao arts changed greatly, but they did not leave the area of little Yao arts. Thinking back to when Pu Yao had spoke of the little Yao arts to him, he suddenly understood. These Yao arts were just constructions made up of different combinations of little Yao arts. He instantly understood Pu Yao's intentions. Pu Yao wanted to use this method to give him a deeper understanding of little Yao arts. Thinking about what he had felt just now, Zhuemo instantly became excited because he felt this was an effective method. Pu Yao wasn't useless after all. After criticizing Pu Yao out of habit, Zhuemo decided to rest and recover his spiritual power. When he raised his head, a stammering and nervous voice suddenly sounded in his ear, Elder. Zhuemo stilled and found Nanyu standing nearby. However, his first response was to look around. When he found that no one was standing next to him, he finally realized this little girl was calling him. He rubbed his head and watched as the other was in a trance. This term was slightly weird, and he didn't know them. Oh, the other was a Yao. Wait, Yao. Zhuemo stilled again and curiously examined the other. This Yao looked very normal, and didn't have any of Pu Yao's presence. Oh, compared to the Yao soldiers that he encountered at Desolate Wood Reef, she seemed much weaker. An interested expression came onto his face. This little Yao should be the most normal little Yao. Truthfully, he had never seen a normal little Yao before. So normal Yao looked like this. Nanyu had faint green hair, her eyes were also faint green like a transparent olive stone. Her chin was slightly pointed and didn't look any different from any other person. She was dressed in a short robe and looked very capable. Nanyu felt uncomfortable under Zhuemo's gaze. She couldn't help but panic inside. Was this Darren a perverted Yao? Yao were very liberal about sexual matters. Most Yao came from Flora, and the process took a long number of years. The combinations between Yao would strengthen the clan. The Council of Elders encouraged reproduction. Adding on that Yao were born with long lifespans, they were very uncaring regarding the matters of sex. If it was a female Yao that had some experience, they would have instantly shown a seductive posture immediately. But Nanyu clearly could not do it. Compared to Nanyu's caution and discomfort, Zhuemo was much more casual. He was young, but he had seen much. Right now, he even had a large group of people under his command. If he was still in Sky Moon Jia, he definitely qualified as a warlord. Additionally, he purely thought of this event as broadening his visions. The Yao world didn't have a tincture of a connection to him. What are you called? Zhuemo asked curiously. Nanyu, the slightly nervous Nanyu instantly replied. Oh, what kind of Yao are you? Zhuemo asked. He had a pitiful understanding of Yao. The way that this Darren asked questions was really very strange. Nanyu's nervousness disappeared greatly. Is Elder asking about Nanyu's birth? Nanyu comes from the Wisteria clan of the South Sky. Wisteria clan of the South Sky. Mo was confused. He could understand the individual words, but he did not understand what they referred to when put together. Wisteria Clan of the South Sky. With a light sound of surprise, Pu Yao suddenly popped up. Chapter 339, Origin. Hearing Pu Yao's voice, Mo instantly realized that this Wisteria Clan of the South Sky had some significance. Before he could ask, he heard Pu Yao say to him, "Ask her if it is the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky at Purple Arrow Jie." Mo could only listen and ask, "Is it the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky at Purple Arrow Jie?" Nan Yu was very shocked. Does Elder also know the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky at Purple Arrow Jie? Her expression then dimmed. We migrated from Purple Arrow Jie to Core Wind Jie 600 years ago. Pu Yao did not make a sound for a while. Mo was slightly surprised. It seemed that Pu Yao really knew this Wisteria Clan of the South Sky. After a while, Pu Yao said to Mo, "Ask her how many people remain of the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky." Mo obediently spoke. Nan Yu's expression became even dimmer. "There is only 11 people left in the clan now." 11 people, Pu Yao was dumbstruck. As the situation of the clan was spoken of, Nan Yu felt very bad. The Wisteria Clan of the South Sky had been in decline for a long time. She had no memories of the glory they held in the past. Ever since she could remember, the clan's living conditions had been very harsh. She hadn't thought that this elder would know the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky. She was quite shocked. There were not many teachers in the school that knew of the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky. "Do you practice the South Sky arrow art of the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky?" The elder's question made her pause, but she shook her head. South Sky arrow art was lost 1,000 years ago. Mo could clearly feel these words made Pu Yao shake. Nan Yu was also very shocked. The elder was very familiar with the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky. If it wasn't that she liked learning and had worked hard, she wouldn't know much of the clan history. If it was her other sibling of the clan, they probably wouldn't even know what South Sky arrow art was. Did this elder have a history with the clan? Hope suddenly rose in her heart. Even though Elder looked very young, but Nan Yu would not underestimate him for that. The age of Yao had nothing to do with their appearances. The smooth deconstruction that Elder had performed just now had amazed her. As her thoughts grew, her mood became unconfident. What made her feel even more insecure was that Elder was silent for a long time and did not speak. Her heart continued to sink. It seemed there was no hope. Suddenly, Elder's voice came. "I will pass South Sky arrow art on to you. In return you will follow me for 100 years and will be free after that." Nan Yu seemed to have been struck by lightning. Her mind was blank. South Sky arrow art. Elder knew South Sky arrow art. Her face was filled with disbelief. The records of the clan said that South Sky arrow art was the most powerful Yao art treasure of the Wisteria Clan of the South Sky, and the ultimate skill of the clan. But the records of the clan also did not leave any mention behind except how powerful South Sky arrow art was. She had even doubted the validity of these records and if they had been exaggerated. South Sky arrow art, so this world really had South Sky arrow art. Just as Nan Yu's emotions changed, Mo pursued Pu Yao and continued to urge Pu Yao in a suspicious tone, "Pu, you really know that South Sky arrow art? You really know? Don't fool little kids. If you don't know, and you can't follow through with the lie, it will be embarrassing." Pu Yao, who had been immersed in his emotions, instantly felt conflicting emotions. "Nonsense, of course I know." "You sure?" The suspicion on Mo's face did not decrease. "How come I never heard you say so?" "There's a lot you never heard of." Pu Yao rolled his eyes and said in a negative tone. "Ooh, right. A gentleman is open, the little person hides his schemes. You are usually hidden very deeply. Suemo nodded his head, and then snickered. He raised his face and said, then let's add another century. We cannot be unprofitable. Pu Yao looked dumbly at Suemo. At this moment, he lost the ability to talk. Suemo had no hint of shame. He was very smug. Pu, as a Yao, GE isn't as good as you, but in business, you are far less than GE. After a beat, Nan Yu refocused. She did not hesitate in kneeling on the ground. Teacher. Yao usually had long lives, and a century was not a long time for them. Also, the conditions were really too good. In Nan Yu's view, this elder definitely had a deep history with the clan, so he would use this method to help her. In the sea of consciousness, Suemo sighed at Pu Yao, it's over, can't increase the price. Nan Yu knelt on the ground motionlessly. After a while, she heard elder say gravely, stand up. I do not have the qualifications to accept students and cannot be your teacher. This is a transaction to pass on, South Sky Arrow Art, to you. You can call me Darren in the future. Suemo pretended. Nan Yu was slightly disappointed. Darren was still unwilling to take her as his student. It must be that Darren was very rigorous in accepting students, and she did not meet his requirements. She secretly made a resolution to cultivate and work hard to satisfy Darren as early as possible to be accepted. Also, Darren had promised to pass, South Sky Arrow Art, on to her. This Yao art which had been lost for so long, was it as powerful as the record said? She was full of anticipation. What to do next? Suemo spread his hands and asked Pu Yao. Pu Yao said seriously, you will first teach her little Yao arts. Suemo stilled and then stammered as he pointed at his nose, me teaching? Is there a problem? Pu Yao tilted his head to look at Suemo. Suemo forced a smile and said, you are really too irresponsible to that little girl. He was slightly unconfident. He wasn't afraid at all about explaining spells or formations, but Yao arts. The other was a true Yao. He was a Shouja teaching a true Yao how to cultivate Yao arts, it was too ridiculous. Just teach whatever, Pu Yao said irresponsibly and then disappeared. Suemo stood dumbly in the empty sea of consciousness. Coming out of the sea of consciousness, Suemo looked at Nan Yu who had an yearning expression on her face and instantly had a headache. A beat later, he emboldened his heart. Since Pu Yao said to teach her whatever, if he didn't teach her well, it couldn't be blamed on him. He coughed lightly. Let's first start from little Yao arts. Little Yao arts. Nan Yu stilled. She hadn't thought what Darren would teach first were little Yao arts. Didn't every Yao know little Yao arts? Suemo ignored Nan Yu's puzzled gaze and started to talk to himself. Luckily, Pu Yao had just taught him little Yao arts recently and he remembered them clearly. He thought back as he talked. As he talked, he couldn't help but add in some of his understandings that he had just gotten through deconstruction. At the beginning, Nan Yu's expression was filled with puzzlement and curiosity. But her expression gradually became stern and focused. The little Yao arts that Darren talked about were different in many places than what she understood. Those little Yao arts that seemed so simple in her view actually contained a very abundant number of permutations. She had never thought the permutations of little Yao arts could be so plentiful and complex. There were such deep connections between different little Yao arts. For the first time, the little Yao arts were so profound in her eyes. A bottomless and borderless ocean appeared in front of her. Suemo finally stopped talking. He released a breath. His talk was not as detailed as Pu Yao, but there was nothing incorrect about the main concepts. Seeing that Nan Yu had fallen for his con, he was slightly reassured. But after the talk, what to do next? His mind shifted, and he instantly thought of a good idea. He pointed at the flowers and grasses and said pretentiously, from today onwards, you will start to learn how to deconstruct the Yao arts of vast water clear skies. There are 13,000 Yao arts in vast water clear skies. If you can deconstruct all of them, your understanding of little Yao arts has just begun. Zuomo felt he was like a conman at this time, especially when he saw Nan Yu's gaze filled with respect. He felt even guiltier. He immediately got Nan Yu to start learning how to deconstruct Yao arts. At this time, Nan Yu realized why Darren had been deconstructing little Yao arts all this time. She happily started to learn from Zuomo about deconstructing little Yao arts. Seeing the situation, Zuomo instantly relaxed and started his deconstruction again. The person and Yao buried their heads and started to make damage. After 2 hours, Nan Yu took a break. When she raised her head, she was very shocked. Darren was 1.5 li in front of her. The shock in Nan Yu's eyes faded and was replaced by awe and respect. As expected of Darren, she definitely had to work harder to reach Darren's qualifications for taking students. Nan Yu balled her fists and made a decision. Ma Fan did not cultivate Fiend Ling. He was the only Shouja of Vermilion Bird Camp that did not cultivate Fiend Ling. Even Xia Shan had taken Fiend Ling to study. Ma Fan was studying Clear Sky Sword Scripture. This 5th grade sword scripture was the sect-establishing ultimate skill of Clear Sky sect. Zuomo did not have much interest in sword scriptures, and after experiencing so much together, everyone had deeper bonds, so Zuomo made this public for everyone to study. However, Clear Sky Sword Scripture was profound and hard to understand. Many places were unclear, and those that were just the slightest bit lacking had no ability to understand it. All those of Vermilion Bird Camp that cultivated the sword desired this sword scripture, but there were only a few that could persist in studying it. Ma Fan was one of them. The sword scripture he cultivated had no name, and was incomplete. Other than the power of illusory shadowless sword of destruction, the other moves were scattered sword moves that he had gathered from other sword scriptures. For other people, Clear Sky Sword Scripture was too difficult, but for him, it was a treasure. He was one of the first to comprehend sword essence. The stage of his sword essence rivaled Xia Shan after he broke through to Jin Dan. He was used to taking the best parts from other sword scriptures to use for himself. His sword moves were gathered from a scattering of scriptures, but this allowed him to quickly adjust to using a brand new sword scripture. The destruction caused by Clear Sky Old Forefather while using the Clear Sky Sword Scripture frequently crossed his mind, and reinforced his decision to cultivate this sword scripture. As he comprehended more of the scripture, many places he did not understand instantly flowed. Everyone only saw him in meditation daily. No one knew that his understanding of sword essence increased every day. The silently sitting Ma Fan suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes lit up, and his presence suddenly changed. Chapter 340, Going Fishing. Even sitting cross-legged on the ground, Ma Fan was like an unsheathed sword exuding sword essence. He didn't seem to move but disappeared. Xia Shan, who was cultivating Fiend Ling, suddenly felt his heart move and stopped to look at the sky. At the same time, Xu Long also raised his head to look at the sky with a shocked expression. In the air, Ma Fan silently stood in the fiendish mist. The poisonous fiendish mist was being repelled by an invisible force, and unable to go within 7 chi of Ma Fan's body. Ma Fan's clothes flapped, but what was strange was that while he looked to be of great presence, people only felt the faintest Ling power vibrations from him. Sword essence. Xia Shan's eyes suddenly widened and lit up. His expression changed slightly. Ma Fan's arms were spread out like a great bird in flight. The fiendish mist seemed to retreat in fear. In the blink of an eye, there was nothing within 30 zhang of him. Such a presence made the people of Vermilion Bird Camp below full of admiration. Boss Ma Fan was really Boss Ma Fan. Vermilion Bird Camp was primarily sword show. Everyone's cultivation was not high, but their eyes were not lacking. They understood that Boss Ma Fan had gained a new comprehension of sword essence. The one that saw the most clearly was Xie Shan. The reason the fiendish mist would retreat was because that there were countless invisible and ethereal sword essences in Ma Fan's surrounding space. These sword essences were silently moving as though they were nurturing something. Xie Shan seemed to be suddenly struck by lightning. His mouth was wide and his eyes full of disbelief as he looked at the stern Ma Fan. Manifestation. Sword essence manifestation. Impossible. Wasn't sword essence manifestation a stage that only Jindan Xiuzhe could reach? He found it hard to accept what was happening in front of him. A beat later, the dumbstruck Xie Shan gradually regained focus. The taste in his mouth was bitter. He was a Xiuzhe in Jindan who hadn't cultivated to sword essence manifestation, but Ma Fan who was a Ningmai comprehended it first. Ma Fan's entire body was covered in uncountable sword essences, these fine, transparent and intangible sky sword essences. Sky. Sky. Ma Fan tightly closed his eyes and seemed to understand something. A vast and greatly vicious presence gathered from all directions. Ma Fan seemed like a leaf boat floating precariously in the storm and rain, to be destroyed at the next moment. This was. Xie Shan instantly understood. Ma Fan was cultivating clear sky sword scripture. He instantly furrowed his brows and had a worried expression. Looking at the crimson-tinged sky, the uncertainty in his heart increased. The sky here, it wasn't a good place to cultivate clear sky sword scripture. The crimson-red sky became even more terrifying. Black clouds rapidly formed. At the center of the storm, the environment Ma Fan faced was even worse. When he realized that there was a problem, he already had no avenue of retreat. The sky here was filled with black fiendish energy. They originated from the ferocious battle of 10,000 years ago, and after thousands of years, they could easily corrode one's mind. The sky here had too many elements that did not belong to the sky. The fiendish mist that had been trying to avoid him just now suddenly roiled fiercely. Dozens of tentacles made from the fiendish mist leapt at Ma Fan and sealed him off in all directions. These fiendish mist tentacles were quick like arrows that pierced towards Ma Fan. Just as Ma Fan was going to be entangled and taken away, Pia Pia Pia, the fiendish mist tentacles that approached Ma Fan exploded. These tentacles were destroyed by the sword essence around Ma Fan. But this was just the beginning. Countless red-black fiendish mist tentacles rose from the fiendish mist and leapt at Ma Fan. Explosions continued. There was too much fiendish mist that had exploded. A while later, they formed a thick fiendish mist. The sound of explosions did not stop among the fiendish mist. A red-black egg-shaped fiendish mist ball hung high in the sky. Everyone couldn't help but have worried expressions, but they could only look. They could not help at all. Vast water clear skies. Nan Yu looked at Elder who had collapsed onto the ground. Her eyes were filled with respect. She had worked very hard in the Yao art houses, but when she saw how Elder cultivated, she instantly felt her hard work was nothing in front of Elder. I will come back after some time. Elder threw out these words and disappeared. Nan Yu was not too puzzled. At this time, she was filled with motivation. Elder had used his actions to explain to her how to cultivate. She wasn't in such a hurry to get South Sky Arrow art now. The things she learned today were enough for her to cultivate for a long time. She left vast water clear skies. She needed to digest what she had learned today. Suemo felt very good, very very good. He only took 10 hours to go 30 li, 2 hours shorter than Pu Yao's demand. If he subtracted the time that he had spent explaining Little Yao arts to Nan Yu, he only took 9 hours. When Suemo caught the shock and surprise in Pu Yao's eye, he felt very good. In reality, his spiritual power had almost been exhausted. After 9 hours of high-speed deconstruction, his response this time was much stronger than the first time around. Unable to slowly savor his pleasure, he hurried into meditation to recover his spiritual power. After a whole day, Zuemo finally woke up from his meditation. His spiritual power had only half recovered. It was a pity there were no stars in the sky here, so he could not absorb the power of the skies. His consciousness had exploded in growth from last time. The number of stars in the void above his sea of consciousness had not grown, but each star became even brighter and sparkled in the void. Zuomo's sea of consciousness had completely changed. The ice sword river from the past had almost completely disappeared. This made Zuemo sweat. Those enchanting black flames had no longer rampaged like they had in the past. The black flames had almost disappeared in the area around the gravestone, and shone the black steel-like ground. The black energy that shrouded the gravestone seemed thicker than before. According to Puyao, the path he walked was star spiritual cultivation. The star spiritual sand in his consciousness contained star power. Zuemo didn't feel anything like star power. However, the 10 stars had grown, and his spiritual power recovery rate was stronger than before. Each star spread its light, and the sea of consciousness was bathed in star light. When Zuemo saw the enormous fiendish mist ball in the air, he was astounded. He hurriedly grabbed Xie Shan to ask. When he was informed that Ma Fan was cultivating clear sky sword scripture, he couldn't help but worry. However, he did not have a solution. Of everything he cultivated, his sword scriptures were the weakest at this moment. Right now, the strongest was his great Damo physique. The next was his Yao arts. He couldn't help but grimace. As one that originated as a shouja, there wasn't really much to be proud of. Ma Fan's matter wouldn't end anytime soon, so Zuemo did not go to observe. He turned around his face and found to his shock that a Gue was looking at him. Usually, a Gue was always steps away from him. "Are you better?" Zuemo probed. A Gue did not respond. Zuemo shook his head. He really was fantasizing. He grabbed a Gue's hand and his consciousness went into her body to make a close inspection. His brow quickly furrowed together. A Gue's body was a mess, so withered there was no life. From this point, it didn't seem any different than usual, but Zuemo found there was an extremely small patch of purple on a Gue's heart which had not been there before. Zuemo would examine a Gue every 2 or 3 days, and was very familiar with the condition of a Gue's body. There was no purple mark in his last inspection. It was possible to see that the purple mark had formed in the last few days. Zuomo's body suddenly dropped down. This meant that new changes had happened in the last few days to a Gue's body. He couldn't help but become worried. If it was a good change, then that naturally was very fortunate. But if it was a bad change, he did not have a measure to deal with it. Zuemo suddenly felt a strong sense of urgency. He had to find Water Cloud Embryo as soon as possible. But he also knew if he rashly went into the depths of the fiendish mist, his bones wouldn't even remain. Everyone was working hard at this moment, and this was not the best time to enter the fiendish mist. Zuomo's heart suddenly became restless. He walked out of the campsite. The campsite was at the border of the fiendish mist. It was possible to see threads of thin fiendish mist float by. His eyes turned to the deeper parts of the fiendish mist. What would it be like in there? "You can fish," Puyao suddenly said. "Fish?" Zuemo asked with shock. "Oh, you can take an intelligent talisman, and it will naturally attract many fiend souls," Puyao explained. "You can practice your little Yao arts, and also what? Do you remember the soul base essence you swallowed? If you want to strengthen your consciousness in the short term, this isn't a bad method." Then Puyao sighed. "You have pretty good luck." Zuemo instantly became alert. In his view, fiend souls were food. The main reason that he wanted to learn archaic desolate sacrificial art was to get fiend souls to strengthen his consciousness. With his present strength, entering the deeper parts of the fiend mist was too dangerous. As expected, Puyao was cunning. Suemo thought and took out a talisman. This was the only 6th grade talisman that he had, the 9-turn sky-earth disc. He didn't dare to use Lil Peogda as the bait. The trouble last time was too much. There was a thread of intelligence on the 9-turn sky-earth disc. Even though it wasn't as intelligent as Lil Pagoda, it was perfect as bait. The 9-turn sky-earth disc that could make many jealous was thrown onto the ground. Suemo stood nearby and widened his eyes. A short while later, a red light suddenly charged out of the fiendish mist and headed straight for the 9-turn sky-earth disc on the ground. Suemo snickered. The little Yao art that had already been prepped on his hand was thrown out. Hiss crack. The little Yao art was not powerful, but Yao arts could subdue fiend souls to start with. This fiend soul didn't even get the time to shriek before it was destroyed. Suemo casually opened his mouth and sucked it in. That thin strand of base source entered his mouth. Fiend souls continued to come over. Suemo quickly found that little Yao arts were perfect for dealing with fiend souls. Right now, he was very familiar with little Yao arts, and didn't even need to think before he could successfully cast. What he actually needed to be careful of was that the soul base sources did not slip away. He felt it even more clearly this time. The soul base sources absorbed into his body all entered the stars in the void of his sea of consciousness. Compared to last time, there was a much less number of fiend souls. Suemo was very unburdened. Shixiang, what are you doing? At some unknown time, Gongsun Cha had come over and asked curiously. Suemo's hand shook. Several strands of soul base source drifted towards Gongsun Cha. Chapter 341, Shidi's spell. The threads of soul base source was very faint, as though they would dissipate in the air at any moment. What is this? Gongsun Cha had a curious expression. He opened his hand and the threads of soul base source flew towards his palm. The soul base source flew into his palm. Before he could study it, they entered his skin. 3 shocked exclamations sounded out. The curiosity on Gongsun Cha's face turned to surprise. Suemo was also very surprised, and the last sound of shock came from Pu Yao inside Suemo's sea of consciousness. Gongsun Cha closed his eyes and savored it for a while. After a moment, he suddenly opened his eyes and said joyfully, Shixiang, what is this? This is really good. Of course it was really good. Suemo muttered inside, but he was also happy. He could see that the soul base source of the fiend souls were of great benefit to Gongsun Cha. His mind suddenly moved and he asked, Shidi, what spell are you cultivating right now? Gongsun Cha's face blushed shyly. He said embarrassedly, I just randomly made a way to cultivate. I don't know if it is useful. I was just thinking of asking Shixiang to help. Suemo looked with shock at the shy Gongsun Shidi like he was seeing a ghost. Seeing Suemo's expression, Gongsun Cha's pale face became even redder like a mature peach. I heard that battle generals have specialized cultivation spells. Since I didn't have any, I thought about making something close to it. His words became smoother as he spoke, and his eyes flashed with excitement. I found later that there are many battle generals in the war chess games. Even though they are Yaoma battle generals, but I could use them as references. So I got some stuff. Shixiang, help me take a look. He ignored Suemo's strange expression and spoke of his idea. At the beginning, Suemo was unconcerned. If it wasn't Gongsun Shidi, and it was any other Zhuji Xiuzha that ran to him and said they were going to create their own cultivation spell, Suemo would definitely put his feet on their face. Suemo's expression slowly became grave. It was very clear that Gongsun Shidi's idea was much more developed than he had predicted. When he finished listening, the first thought he had was, it was too crazy. He looked dazedly at Gongsun Cha. Gongsun Cha finished speaking in one go and finally noticed the strangeness in Suemo's gaze. He instantly felt uncomfortable. Had his thinking been incorrect somewhere? This shy and bashful shitty in front of him had created such an insane and extreme cultivation spell. The contrast was too big. Suemo felt it was very strange. Gongsun Cha's idea was very simple. First, he concluded what was most important to a battle general was the consciousness because the consciousness was of the greatest help to controlling the battle situation. This was also why Yao battle generals were the most outstanding of all battle generals. Of course, Ling power was necessary. Xiuzha battle generals had their own unique qualities. Where did spiritual power and Ling power come from? The core of the spell Gongsun Cha had created was one word, steal. When Suemo understood this point, he had to sigh. As expected of a battle general's cultivation spell. It completely fit with the thinking of a battle general. He was even suspicious. Had the frequent raids in Little Mountain Jia left after effects on Gongsun Shidi? What surprised Suemo even more was that while this technique was very rudimentary and not complete, there were no fatal mistakes. He now understood why those threads of soul base source would enter Gongsun Cha's skin. Base source substances like the soul base source were great nutrients for Gongsun Shidi. Somewhat interesting. Pu Yao couldn't resist praising. In Zhuji-in knows to create this spell, his future is limitless. He suddenly felt it was very absurd. Without noticing it, there was a great number of people with power and good talent that gathered beside Suemo. And all of these people without exception had been unknown and disregarded before. Like Gongsun Cha. He only knew of a few rare battle generals that could comprehend spells on their own. This spell in his view was very rough and rudimentary, but as Gongsun Cha's knowledge and strength increased, the spell could be gradually perfected. It was also the beginning stages of this spell that caused Pu Yao to see the rise of a peerless battle general. Pu Yao was very emotional. Even he had never thought that Gongsun Cha would reach this step. Gongsun Cha's speed of improvement made him feel shock. Was this guy born to be a battle general? Such talent. There were only a few familiar names that he knew who could rival it. He couldn't help but glance at Suemo. This boy had great luck. Pu Yao suddenly felt anticipation. He already felt amazement at Suemo's talent. Now that he had the help of a battle general of limitless potential, what heights could they reach? At this moment, he deeply felt that he really made a profit in taking this student. The terrible accounts from the past, maybe there was the chance to get them back. Pu Yao rubbed his chin and smiled darkly. Suemo did not know Pu Yao's schemes. After asking Pu Yao and being informed that there were no significant problems with the spell, he started to help Gongsun Shidi. Gongsun Shidi's spell did not have any major problems, but the most difficult part was the first step. The core of this spell was to steal the consciousness and Ling power of other entities for themselves. But at the beginning, he was like an infant and did not have the power to steal. But right now, there was a great change. The soul-based sources of these fiend souls had no impurities, were warm and nurturing. Gongsun Cha had no problems absorbing them. After discussing with Gongsun Cha for a while, Gongsun Cha instantly wanted to try it out. Battle generals were really not normal people. Suemo muttered inside. His actions were not slow as he continued his fishing. But this time, the soul-based sources were given to Gongsun Shidi. Gongsun Cha did not refuse and absorbed as much as possible. In a short while, 2 smears of red came onto Gongsun Cha's face as though he was drunk. He instantly sat down cross-legged. Suemo stopped. Gongsun Shidi's cultivation was still too shallow. It would take time to completely absorb all of this soul-based source. So he started to swallow soul-based source himself. These were great food to him too. This patch of fiendish mist was endless, and it seemed there was no end to the fiend souls inside. They continuously leapt towards the 9-turn sky-earth disk. None of them were able to touch the 9-turn sky-earth disk before they were struck by little Yao arts and were dissipated like steam to only leave behind a thin thread of soul base source. After 4 hours, Gongsun Cha opened his eyes. With a joyful expression, he leapt up and said shamelessly, "Shixiang, let's do it again." Suemo nodded. He didn't waste words, and continued to cast little Yao arts. He used each of the 500 little Yao arts multiple times, and included some of the low-level Yao arts that he had learned from vast water-clear skies, or he tried to combine different little Yao arts together. The amount of spiritual power expended by little Yao arts was very little. Suemo was also very practiced. Adding on that he continuously absorbed soul base source, his consciousness continued to grow and he became even more at ease. This time, Gongsun Cha absorbed 2/10 more soul base source than last time before he sat down again. After 20 hours, Suemo felt a bit tired and hurriedly put away the 9-turn sky-earth disk. Having lost their target, the fiend souls instantly left. The surrounding became quiet. Suemo sat down with crossed legs. Each of the 10 stars inside his body were bright, and the falling starlight seemed to turn as tangible as mist. He could feel his spiritual power was full as though it was going to spill. Was he going to level up? Suemo's mind moved, and he started his scripture. Sword light flashed in Wei Xing's hands. The fiend souls that leapt forward were instantly destroyed. The few threads of soul base source flew into the flying sword in his hand. This long black sword in his hand was tall, standing up to his chest, and looked like a horse-chopping saber. It was simple in design. The black sheath did not have many adornments. He had found this black sword the first day he had been transported here. At that time, this black sword had been inserted into the ground. He had found the sword sheath nearby. This black sword was filled with a violent presence. Holding it in his hand, his mind would easily be affected. Originally, Wei Xing did not like such a vicious sword. However, he did not throw this black sword away but held it in his hand. He was using this vicious sword to train his resolve. His expression was calm, his steps unusually determined. The fiendish mist could not go within 1 zhang of him. He did not remember how long he had been in this patch of blood mist, but he was not nervous. He was actually very excited. The blood mist in his view was just a harder version of the sword cave. Going through the sword cave alone was very dangerous, but his strength had increased most rapidly in that period of time. Nothing could excite him more than increasing his strength. Also, being far removed from the common matters of the sect which irritated him, his mind was abnormally clear. He could feel his improvement. This feeling hadn't appeared for a very long time. Each step was a steady step he took towards the peak of the sword path. The first day he had been transported to this bloody mist, he had detected the strangeness of the bloody mist. After finding the black sword, he quickly found that the black sword was not affected by the bloody mist at all. When he found that the black sword could swallow the soul base source, he was shocked. This meant that there was a sword spirit inside the sword. Flying swords had sword spirits were the finest quality flying swords, but Wei Xing did not have much joy. This black sword had such a vicious and violent presence, if it had a sword spirit, it would be a vicious spirit. Strangely, no matter how he investigated, he could not find the existence of the sword spirit. His heart did not wallow in the strangeness of the black sword. Even the best flying sword was just a material object to him. If his sword heart was strong, it would not be corroded by external evils. After walking for multiple hours, he stopped and shoved the black sword in his hand into the ground beside his feet. He had discovered that the fiend souls did not fear the black sword when it was in his hand. Once the black sword left his hand, there would definitely be nothing like the fiend souls within 100 zhang. The surroundings were blurry. Wei Xing's brow furrowed. These past days, he tried to control his Ling power, but his Ling power was almost at its bottom. The Ling energy in this patch of bloody mist was very thin. He could only replenish his Ling power through Jingshi, but he usually did not carry much Jingshi with him. The situation wasn't good. Chapter 342, Nanyu's Little Yao Arts. Nanyu walked into the Yao Art House as usual. Her expression was calm. She met many classmates and good friends along the way. Everyone chatted, but no one had the carefree expressions they usually had. The mood was slightly tense. Today was the annual house exam. The results of the exam would greatly determine their future fate. The Purple Lotus Yao Art House wasn't a famous house, but it had some influence in this Jia. This could not be separated from their strict exam. A familiar shout came from behind her. Without needing to turn her head, Nanyu knew who it was. She stopped walking, turned around, and said curiously, "Hong, aren't you exempt from the exam? Why are you here?" Hong was Nanyu's best friend. They knew each other from childhood and had a close relationship. Hong came from a very obscure little clan. However, this clan's Yao were all skilled in illusory Yao arts from birth. Hong naturally studied those Yao arts. Due to her outstanding talent, Hong had been accepted as a student by a teacher when she entered the Yao Art House. Hong did not need to go through the exam, so Nanyu felt shock at Hong's appearance. Hong was dressed colorfully and had a blooming smile on her face. "I came to see your exam. How can I miss such an important time?" Nanyu was very moved, and said, "It's just an exam. There is no need to be nervous. With a Yu's strength, it definitely wouldn't be a problem." Hong was filled with confidence. She suddenly came over with a secretive expression and said in a low voice, "They said that a Darren from the Creeping Sedges Corps." "A Darren from the Creeping Sedges Corps?" Nanyu stilled, and then her expression changed. "The Creeping Sedge Corps of Bing Lon Darren?" Hong was very satisfied with Nanyu's expression and giggled. "Other than Bing Lon Darren's Creeping Sedges Corps, where is there any other Creeping Sedges Corps? How about it, are you moved?" Other than being taken as a student by a teacher, going into the military was also a pretty good path. In the military, one would be able to learn many practical Yao arts, and when enough service was accumulated, it was possible to learn more profound Yao arts. Right now, the fighting at the front was raging, and this was the best chance to accumulate service. Nanyu smiled and didn't speak. If she had not encountered Darren, she would definitely be moved. But right now, she did not have any extraneous thoughts. It was great honor to be able to follow Darren. She was not clear to Elder's identity, but there was a point that was undoubtable: Elder had a deep history with the Wisteria clan of the South Sky. In these past days, she was left full of respect towards Elder. She could clearly feel her own strength leaping forward. The nondescript little Yao arts actually contained such deep meaning. Nanyu's indifference was unexpected to Hong. She made a sound of surprise and re-examined her good friend. Nanyu did not look any different than usual. She still wore plain clothing, but there seemed to be something extra to her. But what was it? Hong could not say. Did something happen recently?" Hong asked probingly. "Nothing." Nanyu shook her head. Seeing Hong's concern, her heart warmed. She hesitated but did not speak of Elder to Hong. Without Darren's permission, she did not dare to carelessly speak of it. However, Creeping Sedge Corps. In the past, entering Creeping Sedge Corps was one of her goals. The mood of the Yao Art House was tense, and slightly restless. The news that a Darren from the Creeping Sedge Corps came to see the exams made every student participating in the exams excited. Creeping Sedge Corps was very strong, and Bing Lon Darren was immeasurable in her power. Bing Lon Darren was also very beautiful, and the dream of countless male students. For female Yao, being able to enter the Creeping Sedge Corps was a good route. Afterwards, Nanyu saw the Darren that came from the Creeping Sedge Corps. This Darren's figure was upright and she was handsome and attractive. Her golden eyes were especially enchanting. This Darren most likely came from the Gold Clan. Standing on the stage, a sharp presence filled the room. Nan Yu found that this presence was stronger than the great majority of teachers in this Yao Art House. The Yao Art House teachers may have deeper skill on the Yao arts, but compared to the combat Yao that came back from the front lines, they were lacking in their killing aura. Many students became excited. It was rare to be able to enter a military troop like the Creeping Sedge Corps that was known all over the Yao world. Without any encouragement, every Yao was filled with competitiveness. The exam began with this anticipation and restlessness. The exam this time was much fiercer than in the past, but Nan Yu was not excited at all. Purple Lotus Yao Art House was not a famed house, and there were only those few familiar faces. There were no new people that made her eyes light up. Also, these novel Yao arts that she would have been excited about before could not cause any ripples in her heart. She felt very strange. It was the first time she felt so strange. In her eyes, those grand and dazzling Yao arts seemed to be insubstantial. Her mind would uncontrollably think of little Yao art combinations that could replace these dazzling Yao arts. This feeling made her uncomfortable. Before, she would be excited when she saw this Yao arts and she would constantly rehearse them in her mind. She silently warned herself to not be proud. She could not underestimate everyone just because she learned something. She suddenly thought about Elder talking of little Yao arts to her that day. She remembered every word that Elder had said. Suddenly, Hong poked her from the side. "You, it's your turn." "Oh," she responded. She refocused and looked at the exam area. Focusing her mind, she flew to the field. Her opponent was Shi Zheng. This was a familiar opponent. Shi Zheng's experiences were very similar to hers. He also worked very hard, but similarly, no teacher had accepted him. However, he was older than Nan Yu, making his situation even worse. When Shi Zheng saw Nan Yu, he was joyed. The Yao arts he was skilled in could subdue Nan Yu to a certain extent. "Begin." The teacher responsible for judging shouted. Shi Zheng's body lit up with light. This was the Yao art that he was most skilled in, rock driving flow. Shi Zheng's clan was Yao from rock, and was innately skilled in rock-type Yao arts. This, rock driving flow, was Shi Zheng's best Yao art. The lights on his body could perform greatly in defense, and it could stop the enemy from harming him when it was cast. A light flashed at the other side. The corner of Shi Zheng's eye jerked. So fast. One Nan Yu's Yao art was already completed. However, he did not panic. The higher the level of the Yao art, the more time it took to cast. Since Nan Yu finished the Yao art so quickly, it definitely was a low-level Yao art, and couldn't stop, rock driving flow. Shi Zheng was full of confidence. He knew very few moves, but due to this, the power of his, rock driving flow, was far greater than normal low-level Yao arts and was at the borders of intermediate Yao arts. Just as he was thinking, Nan Yu's Yao art had already hit the light on his body. The presence of his body loosened. This was Little Yao art, mist manifestation. The concentrated rock energy suddenly lightened and he almost lost control of it. Shi Zheng was shocked. Little Yao arts could be used like this. Several sounds of surprise occurred on the spectator stage. The eyes of the Darren from the Creeping Sedge Corps flashed with light. Shi Zheng was shocked but not panicked. Little Yao arts were just little Yao arts. Their power was very limited. If she thought she could use this little Yao art to make him lose control of the rock energy, that was a delusion. He hurriedly adjusted his consciousness to strengthen his control. He heard Pia Pia Pia, 3 Yao arts in a row which was cast with blurring speed. 2 of them hit his body, and 1 hit the ground under his feet. Little Yao art, compression. Little Yao art, gold transformation. Shi Zheng's consciousness gathered the rock energy to prevent it from dissipating. He hadn't expected a pressure to push over. When the 2 powers collided together, the rock energy immediately collapsed and turned to granite. In the blink of an eye, a thin layer of rock armor appeared on Shi Zheng's body. Yet when the rock armor took form, it blinked with a metallic gleam as though it was a thin metal armor that wrapped securely around Shi Zheng. Shi Zheng felt unable to breathe. His entire body was enclosed and separated from the outside. Gritting his teeth, he tried to absorb rock energy from below his feet when a great force suddenly came from under him. His figure instantly unbalanced and flew to one side. The others only saw a rush of water shoot up from under Shi Zheng's feet and throw him to the side. It was another little Yao art they were very familiar with, Spring Summon. Shi Zheng was hit with another light as he flew through the air. His figure was strangely pinned in midair. Little Yao art, Spider Restraint. Nan Yu's 10 fingers lit up with light like 10 little lanterns. The 10 fingers was poised to act, Little Yao art, Wind Spear. Shi Zheng's head rang. He knew he lost. His body was unable to move, and was trapped and isolated by the metallic armor, meaning he could not absorb any rock energy. He would only be a sitting target. The power of wind spears was not high, but 10 wind spears were more than enough to penetrate him. I lost. His mind was blank. He didn't even know how he said the words. The spectators rumbled. The struggle they had originally imagined ended with such a strange way. Clap clap clap, on the stage, the Darren from the Creeping Sedge Corps clapped her hands as she rose, and said in praise, "Good. Little girl, are you willing to come to Creeping Sedge Corps?" Whoosh, countless eyes gathered at the same time on Nan Yu's body filled with admiration and envy. Many thanks for Darren's favor. Nan Yu respectfully bowed and raised her head. Her eyes were crystal clear. Nan Yu is planning on staying longer in the house. Darren, please forgive me. Hong shouted from below the field. She looked with disbelief at Nan Yu and thought she had heard it incorrectly. The Darren from the Creeping Sedge Corps was also surprised, but she was not angry. She said faintly, "Never mind then." Then she sat down. But those with eyes could see the dissatisfaction of this Darren. On the field, Nan Yu seemed unconcerned. Under the strange looks of everyone else, she casually flew off the field. The exam did not stop due to this little detour. When it ended, there were 3 students that were picked to enter Creeping Sedge Corps. This Darren did not stay. After picking the 3 people, she took them and flew away from Purple Lotus Yao Art House. And Nan Yu that shook all of the house was facing Hong, who had a terrible expression, and felt a headache. Chapter 343, Integrations. Mo was very tired, but Gong Sun Cha looked as though he had just ate a full meal. At the side, Lil Pagoda was also very content. It may have been due to Lil Pagoda's urging that while Mo was fishing, the 3 little ones had come over, and divided the threads of soul-based source among themselves. Lil Black was the first to become full, then it was Lil Fire. But Lil Pagoda's round body seemed to hide a bottomless pit. When his last bit of spiritual power was used up, Mo still didn't get even one bite. Lil Pagoda contently patted its body had become slightly rounder, snuggled on Mo's body and ran off to play. Mo didn't even have the energy to swear. Dropping to the ground, he quickly started to meditate. The spiritual power in his body had been completely squeezed out. The 10 stars in his sea of consciousness started to slowly spin. As the star light swirled, the void above the sea of consciousness seemed to become brighter. Pu Yao raised his head and his expression changed as he looked at the turning stars. If Mo could look into himself at this time, he would find to his shock the starlight given off by the 10 stars in his sea of consciousness was integrating into his flesh and blood. Threads of golden light suddenly flooded out from his flesh and blood. These golden lights were as thin as hairs, and were moving freely in the flesh. These golden lights might be small, but when they appeared, they had a domineering and fiery presence. Pu Yao did not understand much about Mo physiques, but he had deep cultivation, and naturally could recognize what these tyrannical golden lights were. The golden lights were the Great Day essence energies that were born from Zhuo Mo's cultivation of the Great Day Mo physique. The Great Day essence energies nurtured his body and made it even stronger. At this time, these Great Day essence energies were like a school of fish that smelt blood and leapt at the dots of starlight merging into the flesh and blood. This was. Pu Yao was shocked. How could Great Day essence energies swallow Star's spiritual sand? Shocked, his expression became grave. What was happening in front of him was beyond the realms of his knowledge. He was skilled in all kinds of Yao arts. To his knowledge, spiritual cultivation and the Mo physique were clearly divided and never interacted. Who could have thought the two would actually integrate? It appeared as though the Great Day essence energies were swallowing the Star's spiritual sand, but Pu Yao clearly saw that the Star's spiritual sand did not put up any resistance. Otherwise Zhuo Mo's body would have become a terrifying battlefield. The Great Day essence energies were tyrannical, but the Star's spiritual sand was profound. If the two conflicted, it definitely would be a fierce battle. This was what Pu Yao was worried about the most. In his predictions, the best result was the two sides were fine. Out of caution, he made up several plans to resolve this issue, but he had not expected that the Great Day essence energies and the Star's spiritual sand wouldn't conflict at all, but attracted each other. He looked dazedly at such a fantastical scene. Could the spirit and the Mo physique be cultivated together? But it had never succeeded in history. He actually knew of many great geniuses who had died on this path. The connection between Yao and Mo had never been broken. The two sides generally maintained a friendly relationship since they had the same enemy. Under this kind of cultural exchange, the idea of cultivating the spirit and the body at the same time naturally was produced. This idea had appeared many years ago, but there had never been one that actually cultivated the spirit and the body. The conclusion everyone made was that the combination of the two were fine in lower stages. But as one cultivated to higher stages, the drastic gap between the two sides would be expressed. The reason that Pu Yao had not restricted Zhuo Mo from cultivating the Great Day Mo physique was because of how powerful the Great Day Mo physique was at this stage, as it was life-saving. The other reason was that his level was presently too low to cause significant problems. But the scene in front of him defied Pu Yao's expectations and knowledge. These Great Day essence energies were not great in number, but each was peerlessly powerful. The dots of Star's spiritual sand could only be produced by Yao that had awakened their second spirit. How could they integrate? The entire process continued for 6 hours. Dots of star light came continuously from between Zhuo Mo's brows. The Great Day essence energies swam everywhere and furiously swallowed the starlight. The starlight released between the brows gradually thinned. When the last bit of starlight was consumed, the Great Day essence energies retreated back into the flesh and blood. Zhuo Mo opened his eyes at this time. His body felt unspeakably comfortable and content. His spiritual power had completely recovered, and he felt it was slightly full, as though it had leveled up again. His body was also filled with strength. Had Great Day Mo physique also advanced? Zhuo Mo felt it was strange. When he had been at Wukong Mountain, the feeling when he was cultivating, embryonic breathing spiritual cultivation, was not so beautiful. Now, he felt very pleasurable each time, and it was really addicting. The difference between past and present was too great. He was worried that his cultivation had gone wrong somewhere. The slightly worried Zhuo Mo hurriedly found Pu Yao in the sea of consciousness. There isn't any incorrect places in my cultivation, right? A strange look flashed across Pu Yao's face. He did not answer directly, and asked interestedly, "What? Is somewhere feeling not right?" "No, that's not it." Zhuo Mo shook his head. "I feel that cultivation is becoming increasingly pleasurable. If cultivation is always this pleasurable, wouldn't everyone be intoxicated with cultivating every day?" The dullness and hardship of cultivation was very securely rooted in Zhuo Mo's knowledge. Pu Yao's expression was slightly displeasured. He felt Zhuo Mo's words were too ungrateful. Despite his displeasure, he was very interested in this matter. Taking Zhuo Mo's start, he followed along and said, "Then let me inspect you." As Zhuo Mo's strength increased over time, Pu Yao could not manipulate Zhuo Mo's body like he used to without getting permission. After the inspection, the strange expression on Pu Yao's face grew. Zhuo Mo instantly panicked. "What is it?" "Your great Damo physique is almost at first maturation." "First maturation? Maturation? This quickly?" Zhuo Mo still and was then overjoyed. The maturation of a Mo physique was the representation that a Mo physique was advancing. After each maturation was completed, the maturation level of the Mo physique would go up a whole level. The more mature a Mo physique was, the more power it contained. No wonder he felt a bit strange. So his great Damo physique was maturing. Zhuo Mo was very happy. He hadn't thought the first maturation of the great Damo physique would come so quickly. He was also slightly surprised. He had only spent a short time with the great Damo physique, and he was already facing the first maturation. As expected of the great Damo physique that ranked second of all Brigadier Mo physiques. It wasn't just powerful, it was easy to cultivate. If Pu Yao knew what Zhuo Mo was thinking at this moment, he would die from spitting blood. He didn't look any different on the surface, but there were tsunamis in his heart. It was true that Zhuo Mo's great Damo physique was facing its first maturation, but Pu Yao hadn't said the second part, which was the maturation of the great Damo physique, had already begun. The maturation of the great Damo physique this time was completely different than any of the Mo physique's maturations he knew about. Mo physique maturation was an extremely important and dangerous time for any Mo because the Mo physique would reorganize itself during this time. If it was successful, their strength would grow, but if it failed, then it was the end. So Mo were extremely sensitive to the maturation of their Mo physique. When it was the time for Mo maturation, they would find a safe place to safely finish the maturation. Zhuo Mo did not know that his great Damo physique had entered the time of maturation. The great Day essence energies were silently changing his body, yet he did not know. The maturation process that should have been strong and dangerous had become much slower in tempo, so slow that Zhuo Mo could not detect it. As the tempo slowed, risk decreased to the point there almost was no danger at all. It was very clear to Pu Yao that Zhuo Mo would have no problems in finishing the first maturation, but it would just occur over a longer time frame. Pu Yao knew what this meant. The percentage of Mo that died during their maturations was the highest of those that cultivated the Mo physique. His expression changed slightly. Zhuo Mo did not notice Pu Yao's abnormality. Since it was a good thing, he was too lazy to think further. Just as he left the sea of consciousness, Lilth Pagoda came over and glued itself onto him. Lilth fire chirped as it floated around his body. Lil Black was in deep slumber on Ague's head, and Silly Bird was lazily lying beside Ague. A black figure flew out of the fiendish mist like a sharp arrow in front of Zhuo Mo. It was 10th grade. 10th grade exuded a killing energy all over. His black crescent had grown slightly. Zhuo Mo couldn't resist praising him. 10th grade is really working hard. 10th grade clearly was very motivated by Zhuo Mo's praise. He raised his little head. Just as he was going to start a speech, he suddenly saw a light flash through the narrow crack of Silly Bird's eyelids who had been sleeping. He instantly shook, and the words that reached his mouth were swallowed back down. Just at this time, a strange sound came from the sky. The enormous egg-shaped fiendish mist ball suddenly cracked. A vast and viciously sharp presence exploded and spread like a gale wind. Such strong sword essence. Zhuo Mo was shocked. Ma Fan was in that ball of fiendish mist. He hurriedly raised his head and looked at the sky. The noise disturbed the entire camp. Vermilion Bird Camp and Guard Camp all stopped. The vast yet vicious sword essence made them feel fear. Ma Fan looked to be in very sorry state. His clothing was in tatters, and was covered in wounds that seeped blood. What made others feel strange was that his face was unusually peaceful and calm without any hint of pain. He slowly opened his eyes. Even though he was very far away, Mo still clearly captured the joy that spilled from Ma Fan's eyes. Had he succeeded? Mo didn't get to think closely when he saw Ma Fan's body began free-falling. He paled. The light void wings suddenly appeared on his back, and he disappeared from his spot. Almost at the same time, he appeared below where Ma Fan was falling. He caught the unconscious Ma Fan and flashed back to the camp. This change happened in a lightning flash. Before everyone could react, Mo had retreated to the campsite. He carefully placed Ma Fan on the ground. Xia Shan worriedly came over. "Darren, is Ma Fan alright?" Mo carefully inspected and said, "Nothing, he only fainted from exhaustion." Everyone finally was released from their worry. In the depth of the fiendish mist, Wei Xing suddenly stopped moving and his eyes lit up. Sword Essence, you're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.